It says it's now streaming live.
Okay, but just give it, if you could just give it one more pause while it's still setting up on my end. Okay, I believe that we are now live streaming.
All right, so welcome back to the afternoon session of the April 21st Landmarks Preservation Commission public hearing. I am here again with the same 10 other commissioners who were present this morning, and we are a little behind schedule. So we will be hearing 3 items this afternoon, 2 that were previously scheduled for the morning session, which are on the Upper West Side and Community Board 7, and then the final item for the day, which is 1295 Madison Avenue. So I want to thank all of the people who have been waiting to speak on the 2 Upper West Side items. Thank you for your patience. And as we took the break and we navigate this environment, and anyone who is here to speak on 1295 Madison Avenue should exit the meeting at this time and follow along on YouTube. And when we get to that item, that is the time for you to enter the meeting. So you should be watching on YouTube. And when you enter the meeting, our executive director, Lisa Kersavage, will admit you and will prompt you when it's time to speak. You will need to accept being moved into the meeting. Make sure that you've joined audio, and also if you can mute your YouTube channel at the same time so we don't have feedback. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Corey to read our next item into the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We're going to start back with item number 8. This is LPC 20-05622, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1145, lot 41, 120 West 74th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. A Queen Anne Romanesque Revival style row house designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1886 to 87. The application is to alter the areaway and construct a ramp and garbage enclosure.
Thank you. And so any members of the public who wish to speak on this particular item should enter the meeting now. This is 120 West 74th Street. The meeting ID and password numbers are on the screen. And if you'd like to call in by phone, the phone number is also on the screen. We will also display this slide after the applicants have completed their presentation before we begin public testimony. Okay. Edith, can you turn it over to the applicants?
The applicant has entered the room, and please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Nigro, and I'm here to represent the owners of 120 West 74th Street. I believe Mr. Sean Lynn of my office is in here somewhere. What? Trying to connect the document. Okay. So just by way of a bit of background, this property was until 2014 a multiple dwelling. In 2014, it received approval from both the Landmarks Preservation Commission as well as the Buildings Department to be converted to a one-family dwelling. They began work on the project, and after completing the interior demolition, the project was abandoned by the previous owner. Given the unusual circumstance, we sought and received guidance from the Department of Buildings in the form of a CCD1 as to how to return this property to a multiple dwelling. They agreed that it could be returned to be a multiple dwelling as long as we provided handicapped accessibility to the building and the basement level, which is why we are here today requesting approval for a ramp into the building. As you can see, our front yard is set back substantially from the adjoining front yards. So our proposal then, Our proposal then would be to align our front yard with the two front yards, allowing us to create a switchback ramp and take advantage of the spacing between the ramps to create removable garbage bins, so that we can then provide handicapped accessibility to the building. We are proposing to, as you can see, the adjacent front yards have brick bases with wrought iron fences. We're proposing to match and align that condition with the ramps. Sorry. So this again is a section with the bins, the ramp. We're also requesting approval of the wrought iron fence gates on the windows at the ground level. So you can see we're proposing again brick to match and align with the existing brick and wrought iron railings, thus unifying the three properties into one consistent streetscape, as you can see from the renderings. We're here then, therefore, to seek approval of this design so we can proceed with the renovation of the building. I can't hear anyone.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions at this time?
Are there any streetscape photographs?
Oops.
Are there any streetscape photographs?
Right there.
Okay, and just to follow up on Commissioner Goldblum's question, I know that the adjacent houses have brick areaway walls with metal ironwork, but if you go back to the streetscape photos, I see that there is at least one other row house. No, the full streetscape photos. There's another row house, right, that has its original stone cheek wall. Are there others with their original stone cheek walls?
I do not believe so.
Can you go back to the streetscape photos?
Trying to.
Okay. Yeah, there was another photo that showed.
My mouse doesn't seem to be working anymore.
Try clicking on the presentation and then using their arrows to move. There we go. Okay, so I see the top right photo has its stone cheek wall.
Yes.
And maybe 2 doors down. Where are those in relation to yours?
Ours is where this sidewalk bridge is currently located.
Okay. And then I see on the other side of this stoop, there's something other than brick. I think some maybe cast stone. It's hard to tell. And then some curbs. And at the bottom left, let me just move this.
Correct. However, the stoop here, we are the property adjacent to the stoop. So we're looking to align with the two adjacent front yards here.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? Please raise your hand if you have a question and I'll recognize you. All right, not seeing any hands at this time, so I will turn to Lisa Kersavage to begin our public testimony. And again, in a moment, we will have the slide on the screen with the information to call in or enter the meeting. So anyone who wishes to testify on this item should be entering at this time. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. And I would ask people, if you're in the waiting room and not here to testify on 120 West 74th Street, that you leave the waiting room right now. But we had 2 people sign up to testify. And the first person is Will Edwards of Landmark West, who I am admitting right now. Okay, great. Will Edwards, I am unmuting you.
Good afternoon,
Will,
Commissioners.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, Will, okay, great. Could you please state your name for the record? And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Will Edwards for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee was intrigued by this inventive proposal. While not based in historic precedent, the solution meets multiple present-day needs and does not detract from the facade by ensuring that the primary interventions do not rise past the sidewalk level. As policy, the Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee supports accessibility to our landmarks in order to make them available to all New Yorkers. We find the proposed ramp to be an appropriate compromise to allow adequate run to the destination and providing utility, which was often the role of these area ways. The changes do not compete with the underlying original structure and do not obscure any defining architectural features. In regards to the brick, while in conversation with the non-original periphery, the internal enclosure is not completed with a row lock course like the perimeter brick walls, but rather just a stretcher bond courses right up to the metal lids. We ask that the applicant consider a row lock course approaching the metal enclosure cover. Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee supports approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. I'm moving you back into the waiting room. We also had Historic Districts Council sign up to speak. I think they might be calling in on a phone, so I'm going to try phone number with the last number 022. Hello, somebody calling in on the phone? Could you please,
yes,
can you
hi
hear
there.
me? Hi,
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you here to
I can hear
testify
you.
on 120 West 74th Street?
No, I'm here for 244 Riverside Drive. I was on the computer before lunch, and I'm trying to figure it out now that it's after lunch. But I'm here for 244 Riverside Drive.
Okay, so that's the next item. So I'm going to put you back in the waiting room. You could watch this live on Ustream on YouTube to see when that item comes up. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm going to admit now Peter's iPad, which I believe is Michelle Parker from the Community Board 7. Peter's iPad, I just unmuted you. Can you hear me? Michelle.
Hi, I can hear you.
Great. You're here for 120 West 74th Street?
Yes, but I think my co-chair, Kay Carpin, will speak on this resolution. So I would yield my time if he needs it to him. You see him in your
Okay, great.
room? Okay.
Yes, I would ask if you're not planning to speak, could you please leave the waiting room entirely and just watch on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm going to speak on the 244 Riverside Drive, but you want me to exit the waiting room now and then rejoin?
Technically, yes, that would be great if you could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do see Kay Carpin here, so I will add Kay Carpin. I just added you to our room. Kay Carpin, can you hear me? Okay, Kay Carpin, I just unmuted you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Great. Could you please state your name for the record? And you have 3 minutes for testimony.
Yes, let me just try to get rid of the YouTube. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Great. That's Reverend Kay Carpin. I'm co-chair of Community Board 7 Preservation Committee. Our community board felt that this proposal is in keeping with the nature of the historic district, the character of the historic district, and so we unanimously approved it, 32 to nothing. And we particularly were intrigued by the creative nature of figuring out the ADA solution. We felt like it particularly works in context with the brickwork on either side, and had no problem with the wrought iron railings. So thank you.
You're still muted. There we go.
Sorry. Yes, sorry about that. Okay, so I see some more people in the waiting room. Okay, Frederick Becker. Okay, Frederick Becker, I brought you into our room. Frederick Becker. Okay, Frederick Becker, you need to allow yourself to be brought into the room. Okay, Frederick Becker, I'm unmuting you. Can you hear me? Frederick Becker, you need to hit your unmute button. Okay, I think we've lost Frederick Becker.
I thought he was just trying to connect to audio. It looks like he's trying to connect. It says it's connecting.
Well,
now I've lost him.
I've lost him entirely, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna do these in the order that they came in. So Andrew Tannenbaum. Andrew Tannenbaum, I'm unmuting you.
Yes.
Hi, Andrew Tannenbaum, could you please state your name for the record? And you have 3 minutes for 120 West 74th Street.
That's not correct. I'm looking for 1295 Madison. This is amazing I got to you, but I didn't get to the right window.
Okay, well, welcome. But what we would ask, this is for 120 West 74th Street. If you could watch on YouTube, that will be.
I don't know how to get there. I have not been able to get a login for YouTube or your state or your places.
I would suggest we could send you an email. If you could, Rich, why don't you give your email address?
So yes, my email address. You want to take that down? You have a pen and paper ready?
Yeah, 1 second. Go ahead.
Sure. It's RICH.
Yep.
S as in Sam, T as in Thomas, EIN as in Nancy.
So that's Rich Steen.
Yep, Rich Stein at LPC.NYC.
You had Jeff? I thought I only have Rich Stein.
It's Rich Stein at lpc.nyc.gov.
lpc.nyc.gov. Okay.
Okay,
Please.
and I'm going to move you from the waiting room now so we can move on with our item, but we'll email you when 1295 is ready.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I am now going to admit Community Board Chair 7, Mark Diller. Okay, Mark, you've been brought into our room. Okay, Mark, I'm unmuting you.
Thank you. Kay Carpin delivered our resolution. He's the co-chair of our preservation committee. And of course, I agree with everything he said. I just wanted
Could you
to
state your name for the record? I'm sorry,
I
Mark.
did it again, didn't I? I'm so sorry. The intimacy of this device is getting to me. So my name is Mark Diller. I am the chair of Community Board 7. I am grateful to my co-chairs, Michelle Parker and Kay Carpin, for their delivery of testimony and their explanation of our resolutions. I just felt personally that I wanted to add my voice to this resolution because I think this solution for so many of our townhouses that have been denuded of their stoops, and it's always our first choice to replace those stoops, but when you can't or won't or don't have the option to do so, this solution where they put the trash bins in the space in between the handicap ramp and use the areaway for the ramp to create handicap accessibility and still maintain that functionality, and then to do it in as handsome a design as they have, I think is a template that we would like to suggest to others. And so I would be remiss if I didn't add my voice to my personal voice to that of the board in this matter. And so I would join with my colleagues in recommending approval.
Great, thank you, Mark. Putting you back in the waiting room. Seeing some more people here. If I could just say one more time, if you are testifying on 1295 Madison or on Riverside Drive, this is not the correct item and you should leave the waiting room. But I will admit Elliot Goldman. So Elliot Goldman, we brought you into our room.
I'm sorry, I believe Elliot Goldman is also going to be speaking on 244 Riverside Drive. I have him as a sign up for that address.
Okay, Elliot, I've moved you back into the room. And I think with that, everybody that is for this item has spoken. The rest of the people in the waiting room, you're for later items. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, I just want to remind people that it is much more efficient for us to move speakers and make sure that we are having everyone speak who has called in to speak on a particular item if our meeting consists of just those people. So if you are not here to speak on this item, please exit the meeting and follow us on YouTube and call back in when your item has begun. So Rich, do we have any written testimony on this or a resolution from the community? Oh, well, we already heard from the community board, but do we have any other written comments?
No, just from the community board on this item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I want to just turn back to the applicant now. I think, the testimony was very supportive, but there were some comments about the brick pattern and relating to the pattern of the brick on the adjacent walls. And I don't know if you want to respond to that or make any other final comments.
Well, we are matching the brick coursing on the adjacent properties.
Okay. All right. And is your intent to match the brick color and size as well?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Commissioners, do we have any final questions for the applicant before we close the hearing? And please raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, so not seeing any hands raised, I will ask Commissioner Holford Smith to make a motion to close the hearing. I'm trying to unmute you and I can't, it's not unmuting. So I'm going to go to Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I had myself on mute, sorry.
Okay, will you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
All right, and Commissioner Shamir Barron, will you second that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And now I'm going to take everybody off of mute so that we can vote on this. Okay. All right, commissioners, everyone in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed to closing the hearing? Okay, so that passes. The hearing is closed. And I'm going to move us into our public meeting portion of this item and our discussion. And so I will start with Commissioner Devonshire.
I can be in favor of it.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Likewise.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
Yes, I think it's very well done and perhaps a model, as was suggested in some of the testimony for other like situations.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi.
I can be in favor of it. I've been on the computer looking at the street, and there's a variety of bases to the fencing of the building. There's definitely a decent number of stone bases, but there's also quite a few brick bases too. So I can support it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I support it.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, I agree with the testimony. It's a well thought out solution for barrier-free access, and I love what they did with the garbage cans and whatnot. But forever right or forever wrong, because the two neighbors they chose badly in terms of materials. I'm not so sure that means that we ought to be encouraging that behavior. So as far as the materials are concerned, I don't find the brick appropriate, but I do, as I agree with the others, that the layout of this and the solution is terrific. I also want to compliment the applicant on the angles that they provided in this presentation that really help you to understand what's going on in that areaway. But on the materials, I do oppose.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I agree with Commissioner Gustafson that the configuration makes a lot of sense, but that the material should be stucco or brownstone-like finish.
Okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree that the configuration is very well thought out, but I also agree that the material should be a stucco or a cast stone material to more closely represent the brownstone.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin.
I agree that the setup for the ramp is very good, and also that the materials I think would be superior if they were in brownstone or stucco. Another concern that I have that hasn't been mentioned is the garbage area. That is, it looks very structural because of the use of the brick, and it seems to me that the garbage enclosure should be clad with wood or with metal, working with the staff, because otherwise it looks like a piece of architecture to me anyway, and it's very uncharacteristic of most garbage enclosures.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I actually think that the brick is okay. I think that I have no problem with the configuration. I have no problem with the garbage being in metal as opposed to wood. I think that none of these buildings in this configuration are historic. And I think that uniformity in this case is better than creating a non-historic condition that is not continuous either.
Okay, all right. So I agree. I think, my initial reaction was also that it would be preferable to have a cast stone material that related to the brownstone on the facade, but I do see the value in some uniformity within this group of three, and recognize that the street has a lot of variety on it, and that putting back something that looks like stone but isn't the original wall doesn't necessarily add to the unifying the streetscape, and will still result in a lot of variety. So I can be persuaded to go along with the brick. So with that, I think we have 7 who are in favor of the proposal as is. And I'll ask Commissioner Devonshire to make the motion. sorry, I will not ask Commissioner Devonshire. I will ask Commissioner Shamir Barron to make the motion.
She can't.
So moved.
No, can you read the motion?
But I would prefer that it would be stucco or
Oh, okay.
brownstone material.
I apologize.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm going to ask Commissioner Lutfi.
Okay. In the matter of LPC -20-05622, 120 West 74th Street, Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District, a Queen Anne Romanesque revival style row house designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1886-87. The application is to alter the areaway and construct a ramp and garbage enclosure. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will provide barrier-free access into the building without eliminating any significant historic architectural features, that the proposed fencing, handrails, ramp, and steps will be simply designed, compatibly scaled to the areaway and typical in terms of material and finish, that the proposed areaway fence and walls will approximate the footprint of the historic areaway and will closely align with fencing and walls at neighboring areaways in terms of height and placement, thereby harmonizing with the streetscape, and that the ramp and garbage enclosure will be situated below the grade of the adjoining sidewalk paving and partially screened from view by the proposed walls and fencing, helping them remain a discrete presence.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland, will you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Rich, you can now take the roll call for the vote.
Great, thank you. Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Nay.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Nay.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Nay.
Okay, with 7 in favor and 4 opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved as is. Thank you. Good luck to you, and we'll move on to the next item.
The next item this afternoon is number 9. This is LPC 20-05813, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1887, Lot 36, 244 Riverside Drive in the Riverside Weston Historic District Extension 2. A Renaissance Revival style tenement building designed by Robert T. Lyons and built in 1907. The application is to install a barrier-free access ramp.
Okay, thank you, Corey. So again, the only people who are entering the meeting at this point should be the people who wish to speak on 244 Riverside Drive. The meeting ID information and the phone number to call in are on the slide at this time. Everyone else who is in our meeting who does not wish to speak on this application should exit the meeting at this time and come back when we are on the next item. Okay, Edith, you may turn it over to the applicants now.
Okay, the applicants have entered the meeting. And if you could just state your name for the record and you may begin.
For 244 Riverside Drive, and we have a project to provide a entrance ramp, a handicap accessible entry ramp to the front entrance of the building. Let's see if I can. Is this gonna? I'm sorry. As far as there we go. Okay. All right. So we have this is a 63 unit, 6-story neo-Renaissance building. We have a limestone base with brick and terracotta decoration above. The building is entered on a central with a central courtyard with that leads to one main front door. There's 2 rows of stairs that lead up to the front entrance. There's one up from the sidewalk, and then interior to the courtyard, there's a second row of stairs, a couple of steps up to the main door. And we were asked by the client to provide this, it's an aging building, to provide a ramp that would allow folks access up into the main lobby from the sidewalk level. So, and I'll just kind of start with the renderings that we have here. So this is the existing photo of the entrance. We have these two limestone bollards surrounding this entranceway. On either side of the bollards are a kind of a pipe railing system, which may or may not be original to the building. It's unclear. And then what we're proposing is to bring a ramp up on. This is the this would be the south side of Riverside Drive. This is 97th Street over here for reference. Taking advantage of the hill to shorten the length of it, replicating the tube railing to bring us up onto a new landing and into this courtyard. So here are just a couple, is just the reference map. We have a couple of photographs from 1940s. The facade is relatively intact. There was a cornice that's just since been stripped down, and there was a kind of a decorative, I think it was a metal kind of awning marquee structure, which was stripped. There was nothing there in the 1980s, and it's since been replaced by the fabric awning that you saw in the prior photo. Here are some sidewalk shots looking looking south along Riverside Drive. The red line is the location of the proposed ramp. You can see the awning that's up there. And then we also have the second photograph showing the north, the view looking north. You also get a better sense of the tube railing that's there. The tube railing is, notably protecting. There's a moat, kind of a narrow areaway, which surrounds the perimeter of the street-facing portion of the building that continues along Riverside and around the corner on 97th Street. There are no open windows or any other access points inside of that areaway. Right at this point, it's kind of a dead end down there. Inside of the courtyard, which is actually, it's the roof. There's a basement space underneath it. You have an existing 2 steps up to a landing, and then another short 4-inch step up to the main entrance doors. We are proposing to build a ramp, to actually rebuild the landing so that the landing is flush with the entrance doors, rebuild the stairs, and then a ramp that's interior to the courtyard. Existing plan showing the steps up from the areaway, guardrail. Existing elevations. So these are, we kind of went through these before. There are a couple of fire escapes which land in the interior courtyard, one of which would need to be modified to such that it doesn't block the proposed ramp. And here's our proposed plan. So this is kind of looking at what we're trying to get done here. We have a 3-foot wide ramp coming up, approaching from the south on Riverside, continuing up, and continuing onto the secondary ramp to this new landing. We are rebuilding all of these landings here, at least in both of these cases, in order to properly reconstruct the stairs. The historic bollard in this case, we would want to keep intact. Materially, we're looking at, so here's just a proposed and kind of color rendered elevation. We are looking at maintaining the look of the original limestone. We would use cast stone to replicate the limestone, both on the, this is the sidewalk ramp, and this is the interior ramp. Both ramps would be finished similarly. We do show the existing stairs that are right there right now it's a brick riser with a bluestone tread, and our current scheme shows replicating what's there right now with those same 2 materials, the brick and the bluestone. So this is just going into some of the details. This is the areaway, which would be bridged over with the new stairwell. The railings, we are proposing a narrow, because the existing railings aren't compliant. We are proposing a light colored infill, a steel cable infill, which the idea being that would not read on the facade as well, but still be compliant. So we would keep the existing historic material on the railing, but make it code compliant with the second element. Just an up close of the cabling. And so, I mean, that's in effect, that's kind of what we're looking at. We did, you know, that's the proposal. I think that at this point, I'd kind of be happy to listen to your guys' thoughts and move forward.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? Please raise your hand so I can recognize you if we have any questions. All right. I see Commissioner Holford Smith has a question, so please go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering, at the end of the presentation, there's another plan that shows the ramp stopping at before the arched opening, entering. Is that an alternate? That's alternative.
Yeah.
Are you also proposing that you could do this solution as well?
This was a study that we looked into. We did several different feasibility studies before we landed on the final approach. This is one of the issues with this corner is there's a bus stop right outside the building. And in order, so we looked into the idea of trying to save the width of the existing stair, you know, kind of preserve some of the symmetry at that entrance. When we did that, you know, it would require a variance from the Department of Transportation. We approached the client with that. Because of the location of the bus stop, there's a subway a block and a half away, and there's a busy park entrance right across Riverside from here. They are very concerned about the fact that, you know, so the bus is 40 feet long. We're 28 feet, excuse me, from this stair as it is right now, of making that sidewalk so narrow, even if DOT would grant the variance. But we wanted to be able to kind of show you that we were thinking of other options, and this one, when we researched it, did not seem feasible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so not seeing any other hands being raised, I will turn to Lisa to take public testimony.
Okay, thank you. And we had 3 people sign up to speak on this item, so I'm going to call them first. And I'm going to start with Simeon Bankoff, Historic Districts Council. Okay, Simeon, we have you coming in from the room, and we'll unmute you. There we go.
All right. You can hear me? Good.
Yeah, we can. So thanks. Please just state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
You got it. Simeon Bankoff, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. Good afternoon. HGC objects to the applicant's initially proposed scheme, which would effectively shrink and obstruct the interior courtyard opening and this historic tenement building. The alternative plan number 2 shown in the presentation at the very end, which Commissioner was talking about, is our preferred resolution, as it would maintain the width of the stairs and the 2 symmetrical piers that link and frame the opening of the interior courtyard. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Simeon. We'll be back to the waiting room. The next person that signed up was Will Edwards from Landmark West. So I'm going to bring you into the room, Will. Okay, great. Will, I've just unmuted you. Can you hear me? Okay,
yes,
great.
I can hear you.
Will, I've just unmuted you. Can you?
Sorry, I was unmuting the YouTube live stream. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Will Edwards for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee would first like to thank the applicant for a thorough and thoughtful presentation that clearly identifies their proposed intervention. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee fully supports the accessibility of our landmarks in order to make them available to all New Yorkers. We find the proposed ramp to be an appropriate compromise to allow access to this building while not competing with its original design. The entrance points are thoughtful and respond to architectural cues from the facade. These ramps would complement the underlying structure and not obscure any defining features. Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee fully supports approval of this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Will. Okay, the next person that signed up to speak is Elliot Goldman. Thank you. Whoops. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Person that signed up to speak is okay, Elliot Goldman, we've brought you in from the waiting room. Elliot Goldman. Elliot Goldman, you just have to accept being brought in from the waiting room. Okay. I know Mr. Goldman did sign up to speak, but we might have to try him again, perhaps.
You can try potentially making the phone call.
Wait, Elliot Goldman, I think you're now in our room. Can you hear me?
He's back in the waiting room, Lisa.
No, he's not.
No. I can see him.
Elliot Goldman, can you hear me? Okay, we're gonna have to put him in the waiting room. Okay, now I'm going to admit Peter's iPad, who I believe is Michelle Parker from the community board. I've unmuted you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Great. Can you please state your name for the record and your 3 minutes?
thank you. Michelle Parker, CB7, co-chair of Landmarks Committee. Our full board approved this application 31-010, so one person abstained. And 31 voted in favor of it. There were no objections. We took into consideration the fact that I guess we'll be seeing clever ways to install ADA ramps. We agree with Landmarks West that everybody should have access to their buildings, to historic buildings. We heard from a resident who brought forth this proposal to her co-op board, as well as Mr. Goldman, the VP of the co-op board, who spoke in favor of it, in support. We heard a proposal from the treasury of the co-op board for an installation of an elevator on West 97th Street, but as the applicant said, that is a very busy street and entrance to the Riverside Park, as well as the bus stop around the corner from 97th Street. We approved this application with a proviso that they reconsider the width of the steps and the angle on the railing on the street level landing, because when you look at it face on, it looks a little asymmetrical, but we found that it is reasonably appropriate to the historic district. And we ask that you approve this application with our recommendation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the next person I'll bring in is Committee Board 7 Chair, Mark Diller. Okay, Mark, I've unmuted you. Please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
I'll try to do it right this time. I'm Mark Diller. I'm the chair of Community Board 7. And I thank Michelle because she basically covered absolutely everything that I would cover. If I could just amplify the proviso in the resolution, what we were hoping to accomplish is that if you look straight on in the at the main entrance as it currently is configured, there are these planter-like, they're almost like stanchions that define the edge of the entranceway and the stairs. And what we were suggesting is that even if the ramp has to come up and over that part of it, that the flanking nature of those stanchions be preserved by having that box, if you will, be moved back to where it was and have the ramp continue on over it, so that the facade, when looked at from across the street or even along the street, has the same configuration as it currently does. This is one of those Riverside Drive buildings where it is not rectilinear because of the turn and curve of the drive. And so the asymmetry is exacerbated by the nature of the front of the building itself. And so I join my colleagues in supporting this application, and I hope that explanation of the proviso is of some use.
Great, thank you, Mark. Okay, and then I believe this, let's see, we have somebody on the phone. I think this might be.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hi,
can.
this is Elliot Goldman. Called me. She
Great.
called me. My name's. Hello?
Okay, Elliot, could you please state your name for the record, and then you have 3 minutes to testify.
Sure. Elliot Goldman. I'm sorry I can't be seen on the computer. Let me know when I can look at you guys, but I can't hear anything. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and we
Okay,
can
great.
hear you well.
Great. If you can push me through, that'd be great. I'm sorry. She called me.
Oh no, you're ready to go right now. Everybody's
Yes,
listening.
yes, I'm ready. 244 Riverside Drive. They called me.
Mr. Goldman, you can start speaking. You can deliver your testimony by phone.
Okay, well, someone else is speaking, so I have to wait, I guess, so they can all hear me, right? I can
If
see
you
the
can
picture.
if you can turn off the YouTube that you're currently watching, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'll turn off the volume on the YouTube. How do I do that?
There's a slight delay on YouTube, but that's why it seems
Okay,
like
YouTube, here we are. Turn off the volume.
now.
Okay, I'm muted okay. Mute. Okay, I don't
Okay.
hear the man, but I can see. Thanks, Mr. Stein. I'm good to go for 3 minutes.
Yes, you can start.
I don't see him. Did they call me?
Yeah,
Can they hear me?
You're not on
Yeah,
Zoom,
we
you're on
can
phone.
hear you.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. Is that
won't
Madam
show up
Chair?
on the video.
Is that the Madam Chair?
All right, this is the chair. Mr. Goldman, we can hear you, so please go ahead and begin your comments.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you. I live at 244 Riverside Drive. I'm a resident. I've been here since 1987, and I want to thank Mr. Stein for helping me with this today. Thank you. This is a ramp of convenience as it fails to provide the ADA access sought. If you look at SK3, the existing front doors are not being changed. They need to be changed for ADA access. They must be reconfigured. Hence, this is a ramp of convenience. You also look at that fire escape ladder that they want to move. The proposal seems to put lives at risk by moving a fire escape ladder on a 100-plus-year-old fire escape that will now have a ladder coming down on the edge of a ramp, endangering those clambering down it, while also taking up the very same space that people exiting from the front of the building will need. There was a reason they built it the way they built it. When Robert T. Lyons built it, it was the only one he built for his own ownership. And we happen to be right next to a cliff dwelling as well. So to allow this non-compliant ADA ramp of convenience to go through could kill people in the next fire. Also, I look at SK4, and there seems to be a railing that would lessen the 5-foot radius. That should be explored. If you look at photo number 2, PH2, there's a picture of window lintels. Well, SK1 seems to show the corner lintel being removed, and the damage to the facade by chopping a century-old window in half is not addressed. I heard a reference to the Department of Transportation. I don't see any approval from the DOT. Simply put, this ramp could kill or maim people during a fire, disrupt the architectural beauty that presently exists for the building and the street and the symmetry we have, and as presented, simply does not provide an ADA route. And one more thing. Thank you for your patience. It's a little cumbersome. Just a sec, please. Okay, as mentioned in my submission, I hope you had a chance to see what Mr. Stein helped me with. I'm a board member, but here today solely as a long-term resident. But as a board member, I was only notified late yesterday of today's hearing, after the comment period had closed. That speaks volumes. Fortunately, I was ready working with Mr. Stein, but virtual hearings require more disclosure, not less. Based on the issues I've raised and detailed, a bit more in the two-page submission I hope you've seen, the proposal is not yet ready for approval, and I support Mr. Bankoff's statements and his position as well. Thank you.
Okay,
Hello?
thank you very much for your comments.
You can hear me?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, great.
Okay. And then I see one more, excuse me. One more phone call in here. Last three numbers 588. Hello, on the phone, with last number is 588. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just spoke.
Great. Are you here to testify for 244 Riverside Drive?
Let me get back to call. I just did.
Yeah, I think this is
Goldman?
Elliot Goldman.
Oh, you've had another call in. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, with that, I believe that is the end of the testimony.
All right, thank you, Lisa. And thank you everyone for speaking. Rich, do we have any other written testimony that was submitted to the agency?
Just the community board resolution.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Roy, would you like to respond to some of the comments? I know that we did ask you a question about the alternative where you can keep the width of the stairs and do the ramp so that it comes up and meets the stairs, but you'd have to push those stairs forward. And I know that you are concerned about the distance, but I think you did not actually say that DOT would not approve it, but that they had concerns. So maybe you can add some clarity to that statement. And then also if you could respond to some of the other comments about whether or not this is actually compliant and in terms of the railings and other aspects.
Sure. Thanks. I'll start with just as far as the option of bringing the full stair out into the sidewalk is concerned. What we don't have right now is any final yes or no from the Department of Transportation. I think we don't know if they would say yes or no. It's a liminal place between what they would approve. However, we also know just kind of ergonomically and based on the traffic patterns on that corner, we and our clients in particular are concerned about safety of making this corridor so narrow in front of the bus stop on what is a busy corner. When the bus is stopped, it is in front of those stairs. So I mean that's where that stands. As far as the other concerns from Mr. Goldman, the ramp and both of the ramps with the railing configurations are designed in a fully code compliant, ADA compliant manner to provide all required turn radiuses and to bring folks up in there. That's in addition, the fire escapes also have been looked at and designed so that they are landing in a code compliant manner.
Okay, thank you. Could you just go back to the elevation? I wanted to just follow up on the Chair of Community Board 7's comment about that seemed like a compromise where you didn't have to push the stairs out, but just moved the stanchion or cheek wall. And I just want to visualize how that would work if you could speak to that.
Sure, I'm just trying to get control here, see if I can move this around. Actually, I will go to, So I mean, what I think he's referring to the bollards that are right here. See if I can get a better image of this. Let me go back up to the top here. So what he was referring to, this elevation is probably the right one. So this is one of the existing historic bollards. I think what they were suggesting was if we could bring this reconstructed volume over so that it's kind of stays as a vestigial element there from the existing staircase, which is something we would be happy to look into. We've gone back and forth with the staff member and a couple of different designs. We landed on this one, but we can always take a second look.
Okay, and if you moved that over, you would just still have the flat vertical wall of the side of the ramp.
Yeah, there would have to be some sort of a wall
Okay.
there.
Okay, but it might be a compromise for symmetry. All right, commissioners, do we have any other questions for the applicant? And I am looking to see if I see any hands raised, and I do not. So, oh, I have Commissioner Jefferson. I see your hand is raised, so I'd like to recognize you now. Go ahead.
I have a question about the curb on the handrail on the left-hand side. If you continue the curb on the right-hand side and brought the handrail, the vertical handrail down to kind of screen the ramp, the angle of the ramp, would that make it, it's just a suggestion because the ramp is so heavy that I thought if you could screen it with the verticals, it's just a suggestion. Am I making any sense?
I'm not sure if I'm totally, are you talking about the horizontal elements on here?
You have a curb on the left-hand side that the handrails are sitting on, right?
Right.
It's about a 6 curb. And then when you go across to the right-hand side, you're putting the handrails on the ramp edge, the diagonal of the ramp. So I'm suggesting that just bring it down so it lines up with the curb of the left-hand side, so that they kind of all harmonize together as one piece.
We could look into, I can take a closer look at that. I hear you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions at this time? Okay, so I think we will then move to close the hearing, and Commissioner Chapin, will you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Gustafson, will you second that?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's begin our discussion. And I want to just, start out again by saying that the commission has a long history of finding solutions to provide barrier-free access at landmark buildings. We think it's very important that all landmark buildings are accessible. But there are, we consider the effects on the architecture, and in this case, thoughts about symmetry, materiality, size, and placement. And so, we've had some discussion about pulling the steps out so that the ramp can come into the side of it and you can maintain the width of the stairs. The Community Board 7 has talked about a different alternative that's more of a compromise that allows the ramp to land where it's currently landing without pushing the steps out, but pushing the cheek wall over to maintain some symmetry. So, commissioners, I welcome your thoughts on this, and either following up on some of those thoughts or some additional thoughts. So I will go ahead and start with Commissioner Holford Smith.
Sure. Well, the reason I asked about the alternative plan was because it, resolved itself so much more successfully in relationship with the original stairs and the opening into the courtyard. But I understand the concern about having pushing the stair into the sidewalk and making that sidewalk narrower. So I think I can be persuaded that the proposed layout could be appropriate, but I agree that having the the planter that, the new planter that used to mark the opening of the courtyard, having it in the middle of the framed opening makes the asymmetry even more severe. So if they could work out a way to put that planter in the same relationship to the pier as the original, and they may have to do some modifications to the way the landing, the way the ramp hits the landing, but I think that might help improve the condition.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, this is a difficult one because, as you were saying, Chair Carroll, we tried very hard to, find a way to authorize access. This situation really is very disruptive to the entryway and looks so asymmetrical. I would really like to see them find some way to preserve the sense of symmetry here. And I'm hopeful that maybe one of the commissioners may have a suggestion on that. I'm looking at it myself. I'm not sure what the possible solution is, but this is just very unfortunate in the way that it disrupts the facade, and there's not so much detail on this building. It's a very important part of the presentation of the building.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Okay, I agree with what Diana just said. It is a very difficult problem. The solutions that spring to mind, none of them really strike me as particularly satisfying or effective. Sorry for the background. If you were to position the bollard in its original location, symmetrical about the entrance, two things would happen. First of all, like Ann had said, you're kind of accentuating the fact that the stairs are missing. Second, three-dimensionally, that bollard is actually higher than the floor of the ramp. So you basically have a bollard that's maybe 6 inches deep. It would just look like this kind of sheared off block. I think it would look very peculiar. So while you preserve the symmetry and elevation, conceptually, I think you would look at this thing and say, what the heck is it doing there? The second thing occurred to me was to leave the decorative railing down at sidewalk level and have the ramp be behind it. The problem with that is that if you look in the plan, the original position of that railing is quite a bit further closer to the building than it is proposed now. And if you had to leave the ramp, which is already shown at minimum dimension, it would be pushing the railing even further into the street. So again, you'd achieve an elevation that looks right, but not a real experience that would feel right. So I don't have nothing jumps to mind as being a particularly great idea. I don't think that this is a very good. And I looked up while we were talking. I mean, a typical bus stop is around 40 feet, and this here would give you space of about 28 feet as currently drawn on the option. So if you were to preserve a full bus stop's worth of space, you'd have no room left for the stair. So my guess is that DOT, which is not an agency known for flexibility, would be able to provide that with approval. So I don't have a great idea here, and I don't really think what's shown is really good, but I don't really see an option to it.
Okay. Commissioner Devonshire?
No, I agree with Michael. I think we're sort of hemmed in by what the options can be, and I agree that DOT would not be amenable to having the thing come out further. So I would reluctantly agree to approving this.
Okay.
We don't really have any choice.
All right, Commissioner Chen.
The same feeling here because
Can you speak closer to the microphone?
We're given a hard choice between the physical limitation and providing accessibility, and meanwhile trying to maintain the symmetry, and we ran out of space here. So I can reluctantly support.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland.
Yeah, I think it's all been said. I think it's a very unfortunate solution, but I don't also see a better one. So it's quite a reluctant vote to go ahead with what we see here. I think this applicant seems to have tried a lot of different options. The community board and others on the west side have participated in it. So maybe this is as good as it gets, and it's just unfortunate that it's not better.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi? Where are you?
Struck silent.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes, if you go to the elevation, can you go to the elevation? Okay. Okay, up the upper, I see the handrails as dominant and they make a strong composition. And I'm saying, okay, if we're going to use, if that's going to be dominant in terms of the facade, why not use them to kind of camouflage the angle, even though they're not in the same plane, they're separate. They do, in terms of facade relationship, do work. And if you look at the edge of the handrail, the end of the handrail, if that was extended somewhat out, you would have a design of movement of handrails that could be a very nice composition. There's nothing you could do about the opening and the opening and the penetration that you're going to have with the void. You're not going to be able to solve that. But if you go to the plan, you see that strange angle that they have at the end of the ramp? If that was made parallel with the other bollard, it might make the situation, make that entry, but right now that angle doesn't do much for the negative space.
Okay, all
That's
right.
my suggestion.
Thank you. And I see we have two commissioners with hands raised, but I think first I'll just finish the order and then I'll go back to you, Commissioner Chapin and Commissioner Holford Smith. So Commissioner Gustafson, can you comment next?
I guess I'm not feeling hemmed in quite yet. And my feeling is that we shouldn't be letting the applicant's opinion about what DOT would say or our own take precedence over what DOT actually says. I don't think we're actually ready to hear this until we hear DOT say that because there's only two real choices here. One that either they will accept or reject, which is the perfect one, right? Or the imperfect one we have. So I think I want to hear what they have to say. I can't, say that this completely inappropriate result is approvable until I know. There are, literally hundreds and hundreds of bus stops around the city that don't have more than 5.5 feet from the back of a bus. That's just the way the streets are. And I realize they may say, well, this one does, and so we're not going to change it. But that's a guess. And so I think that what we ought to do is to, send them back. Let's find out what the answer to this really is, and then we can make a decision.
Okay, Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yeah, I was trying to think about if there was a sort of a cosmetic thing to do to continue the stair sort of forward of to continue the lowest tread forward of the ramp. Do you know what I'm describing?
Yes, I do.
And to see if that would achieve kind of visually some sort of interlocking that allowed for both to exist. And I can't quite tell if that would work because it's only one tread, it seems. that it would be. I mean, if there was one more, if
Right.
it was half of it, maybe you could get that to work. So, so I would have tried something like that. And then I do agree with Commissioner Gustafson that it would be important to see what other allowances can be made from in terms of pushing back the ramp into the bus stop area. And short of that, I would agree to approve it as is.
Okay. All right. So, and I think, the revocable consent process is a process. And I think that the LPC approval, it's one of those ones where the LPC approval is needed to go through the actual process. So getting a definitive answer may not be achievable before we can act. But we can certainly see if we can get this, at least the staff's best opinion, which I think the applicant has tried to do. And so let me go back to Commissioner Chapin, who has a question and then, or another additional comment, and then Commissioner Holford Smith.
And Commissioner Lutfi has joined us now. She got knocked off.
Okay. So Commissioner Chapin, did you want to add something?
I was, it just crossed my mind, was there any possibility of some kind of lift? But then I thought they had said something about the subway beneath and so forth, but it just occurred to me that it's an odd situation, but would there be some way you could utilize a lift in conjunction with some modification of the stair and bollard? I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's-
Okay. Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yeah, I was just, looking at the plan and wondering if there was an option in order to just completely change the relationship of the stair to the entry, if the stair could run parallel, I guess I should say perpendicular to the building, and have the railing span over the landing. So you're actually entering the building steps from the left-hand side, perpendicular to the building. And perhaps you could make that, instead of a 3-foot ramp or stair, make it 4 feet, which wouldn't impose as much on the bus stop, but it might, I don't know if that works, structurally, but get rid of the planter and basically enter from the side and have the railing come up and over.
Okay.
It's a completely different approach to the building.
And can you just, I'm sorry, if you can just repeat that, because I didn't quite understand that suggestion.
Sure. So instead of having the stair from the sidewalk enter parallel to the courtyard, in front of the courtyard, enter from the left-hand side perpendicular. So you're basically facing the ramp. So that you're basically coming up a ramp to a landing and then down a stair.
So then you would have a sort of solid wall facing the entrance.
Yes.
Stair on one side and ramp on the other.
Very different, to what is there and what it was there historically, but what it could appear more symmetrical about the entrance.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. Commissioner Lutfi, I think you're back. Did you want to add a comment or a thought or?
Well, I think I missed everybody's comments.
Okay, so I think, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 people who sort of felt that there were not a lot of other alternatives, that the applicant had studied alternatives and would approve this, although one of them suggested that the handrail to the ramp be perpendicular to the entrance, not on an angle. If you can see in the plan, it's on an angle. Others felt that there should be more modifications, more rethinking, either continuing to work with DOT to see if the stairs can be pushed out so that the ramp can meet the side of it, or moving the planter or bringing the first tread over and moving the planter or cheek wall so that, or bollard, so that it sort of gives the appearance of symmetry. So that's where we are right now.
So I mean, I didn't ask this question, but where is the bus stop closer to the to the corner?
The bus stop, if you're looking in this plan, is to the left, and it is 28 feet away from the stoop. And we've heard from the applicant that DOT generally, or no, we've heard from Commissioner Goldblum that bus stops are typically 40 feet. So this 28-foot distance would be less than what is a typical bus stop.
But it's closer to the corner. Yeah. But the bus stop relative to the ramp that we're looking at on the right-hand side, is the bus stop right there, or is the bus stop further down the block toward the corner?
I believe it's toward the corner.
So
28 feet.
I'm just wondering if that's the case, why pulling this ramp out, the ramp that they're actually proposing, have an impact in terms of DOT? Because it's not close to the bus stop.
Because I think that the DOT standard for bus stops is 40 feet, and this is only 28 feet from it. So we're making an assumption based on the applicant's representation that of their conversations with DOT, that DOT would not be comfortable being 28 feet close to the bus stop, being pushed out 28 feet close to the bus stop.
I got it. Well, it's a very difficult situation. If there's anything to explore, I think it's worth looking at. Otherwise, I think, given the narrowness of the interior courtyard there and the steps leading to it, I think there just aren't a lot of options.
Okay. So I think that does leave us with 6 people who would support it as is, but we have heard, Commissioner Holford Smith had an interesting idea, which would be a very different approach. And I think Commissioner Chapin also mentioned exploring a chairlift, and I'm not sure that we discussed that during this presentation at all. So I think that we could technically approve it today with the, modification that they continue to talk to DOT. But I just wonder if we want to have them explore Commissioner Holford Smith's suggestion and show us the chairlift idea as well. So, and I see Commissioner Goldblum has his hand raised, so I'm going to recognize you, and then Commissioner Gustafson. Commissioner Goldblum?
Oh, there we go. All right. A couple of things. First of all, if you look in the presentation, they have an option for a lift. I don't know which page it is, but they do have an option for a lift. And a lift is considered by the city to be suboptimal in terms of access. So if a ramp can be provided, there we go. If a ramp can be provided, it's definitely better from an accessibility point of view. I think I just wanted to, also the problem, while I agree in principle with what Don had said about waiting for DOT, I think what that does, practically speaking, is that it might put the applicant in a insoluble bind where DOT is waiting for LPC and vice versa, and you find yourself where you started a year and a half later. So while I think that's a great idea, I don't think it would be fair to the applicant. The other thing I want to just say is I think Adi's idea is fantastic. I think if you pulled the stair forward by, let's say, a tread and a half, you would be kind of cutting the baby in half in terms of the disruption of the sidewalk. Be going from a sidewalk of 5'8", maybe 6 foot, 7 foot, something like that, which is pretty good. And you'd get the expression of the stair 2 risers high. You'd get a deeper bollard, which you could make deeper on both sides. I think you'd have a lot more success. And, if that could be explored with the idea about the railings that Everardo was talking about, I think that you could be onto something that would be a hell of a lot more appropriate.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I just, again, I think that the other alternatives have not been fully explored here. I know we just had a comment that said that, well, ramps are preferable over lifts. Well, we do lifts all around this city, and they do a wonderful job of helping people who need the help. I think that all the options ought to be explored before we make a decision, because the result here is going to be pretty doggone ugly.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
Yes, I wasn't going to weigh in since it's been an hour on this subject so far, but I was one of those super reluctants to vote yes. So I think there's enough other ideas floating and enough ideas that we are now the designers and we shouldn't be the designers. So let's turn it back to the applicant's architect, and come back to us with his best next round, and let's just see it then and make some judgment now.
Yeah.
I think too many questions open right now to vote.
Right. All right. I mean, I think the applicant did explore the lift. We didn't have a chance to ask him about it because it didn't come up in the presentation. But I will say that this type of lift, this elevator lift, would be, I think, even more at odds with the symmetry of the building, because this is an elevator lift and you'd have the shaft rising up in front of the entrance. So I think that, I think that we, and I do think that asking them to go back to DOT now will still only get a best guess from DOT, because until they can go through the final process, they won't have a final determination. So I agree with Commissioner Goldblum about sending them into a year-long process where they end up where they began. So I think that actually we have a nice suggestion from Commissioner Goldblum that if, I know that Fred, you're feeling like maybe now there are other solutions that could be studied, but for the rest of you who felt that reluctantly but comfortable with this, if you could be supportive of approving it with a perpendicular railing to address Commissioner Jefferson's comment, and bringing a tread and a half over and moving the bollard to reinforce the symmetry at this depth. And I'm just going to ask commissioners to give me a raise of hands if they could support it with that modification today, with the caveat that they continue to talk to DOT on their opinion. Okay, so I see one raise of hand, two.
I don't understand it.
3, 4. So Commissioner Bland, it would be, you'd still have the vertical wall of the ramp, but it would be it would be a riser, a tread, and a riser above the sidewalk level. So you would sort of have the feeling of the steps going across, but the ramp would go into it, and then you'd have a vertical wall, and you'd have the bollard at the end framing it.
Okay. It's like maybe, who knows what it really looks like, but let's vote on it. I don't know.
Okay.
We usually don't do this.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, if those of you who would support that, just raise your hand. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Commissioner Goldblum, you're raising your hand on the camera, but not through Zoom. Could you do it through Zoom?
Oh.
Sorry.
4,
People.
5.
And
And Commissioner Devonshire, I saw your hand up before. Is it still up?
Oh, I thought it was, sorry.
Okay, all right. So I think we have an approval with that modification. So Michael, since much of that came from your suggestion, will you make that motion? And then we'll do the roll call and see if we're there.
all right.
All right, thank you.
Keep my mouth closed. Okay. Regarding 244 Riverside Drive, the West End Historic District Extension number 2, application is to install a barrier-free access ramp. I note that the building style, scale, materials, details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the removal of portions of the historic areaway ironwork will provide barrier-free access into the building in the least intrusive manner possible. That the location of the outer ramp at the narrow areaway along the base of the building will be consistent with the presence of curbing and railings along the sidewalk. That the inner ramp within the narrow recessed courtyard will be only minimally perceptible as seen through the outer entryway opening, and that the materials of the proposed ramp, consisting of concrete paving, cast stone cladding, and black metal pipe railings, will be harmonious with the materials found at the sidewalk and facade. However, I recommend that the applicant work with staff to explore railing details and extension of the stoop toward the curb to allow for the impression of symmetry to be regained through the repositioning of the decorative stone bollard and other details as discussed in the hearing. You're muted. You're still.
Commissioner Shamir Baran, will you second the motion?
Second.
Okay, so Rich, will you call the vote and we'll see if we've got this one.
Yes. 1 second. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Nay.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Nay.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Jefferson.
Nay.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Aye.
Okay. With 8 in favor and 3 opposed, the motion carries. Sarah, you're muted.
Okay, so that's approved with the modification. You can, Mr. Roy, continue to work with the staff on this, and we also encourage you to continue to talk to DOT about the other alternative. Okay, so Corey, we'll move to the next item.
All right, this is actually the last item of the day, item number 10. This is LPC 20-06688, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1504, lot 20, 1295 Madison Avenue, aka 43 East 92nd Street in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. A neo-Renaissance style hotel building designed by Louis Warren and built in 1899 to 1900. The application is to alter facades, fill in light courts, and construct a rooftop addition.
All right, thank you. So all the members of the public who have been waiting to speak on this application, we want to thank you for your patience as we are a little behind schedule, but now is the time to enter the meeting. The meeting ID and password number are on the screen right now, as well as the phone number, and you can call in by phone. When you do call in, make sure that your YouTube is muted so we don't have feedback. And we will display this screen again at the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, and we will keep it up for the duration of the testimony. So Edith, you can instruct the applicants to begin.
The applicants have joined the meeting, and if you will state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and members of the Commission. I'm Meenakshi Srinivasan, Senior Land Use and Zoning Advisor at Kramer Levin, Naftalis and Frankel, and I'm here on behalf of 1295 Madison LLC, owners of the subject property. I'm very happy to be here before the Commission for the first time, albeit in this unusual and enterprising form during such a challenging period for all of us. I hope all of you are well and safe, and we really appreciate LPC's commitment to conduct this public hearing in a fair, transparent, and timely manner. I am here with Matthew Adele, the owner of the property, Bill Higgins of Higgins and Quaysbar will make the presentation, and Julio Margarino from Forum 4 Design Studio Architects, who's here to answer any questions. We are here today to present our respectful and modest proposal for 1295 Madison Avenue, also known as Hotel Wales. The property is located at the northeast corner of Madison Avenue and East 92nd Street within the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. We're proposing a plan that respects Hotel Wales' original beauty. We have taken into consideration the comments from the community and at the same time ensured a workable plan that can be executed. Hotel Wales was originally a 9-story neo-Renaissance style building, which has been significantly altered with the removal of a distinctive cornice and extrusions of the primary facade to create the 10th floor. Further, the rooftop additions have over time been placed in no particular manner or order. These visible alterations have significantly compromised the historic proportions and symmetry of the building and the elegance of Hotel Wales' original form. As a part of the conversion of Hotel Wales to residential use, the proposed changes consist of the following: setting back, reconfiguring, and enlarging the existing 10th floor penthouse, reintroducing an historically inspired cornice above the 9th floor at its original location, upgrading and relocating mechanicals and bulkheads at the roof level, filling in 2 interior courts and 1 outer court, and removing the fire stair while retaining the historic baskets. The proposal also includes several preservation measures that meet staff rules. The proposal is within the Special Madison Avenue Preservation District and meets all the underlying zoning and special district requirements. Our intent is to be respectful to the historic character of the building as well as the neighborhood. Since our presentation at Community Board 8, we have met with Carnegie Hill neighbors as well as Friends of the Upper East Side, and I've had the opportunity to review their comments as well as the community boards. We have since then revised our proposal, which we will be presenting today. We request and hope that the Commission will consider this application in light of the existing building's highly altered appearance, and that this thoughtful rehabilitation will bring back the building closer to its original character and prominence in Carnegie Hill. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bill Higgins, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. I'm Bill Higgins of Higgins Quaysbarth. And first of all, congratulations to all of you on the really memorable achievement of keeping the entire landmarks process going forward at this time that none of us have ever experienced before, and hopefully never will again. I'd like to start with some history. I'm sorry, just a technical question. Can everyone see the entirety of the image? All 3 of them? Okay, I'm not seeing everything on the far right. Good, thank you. So these are historic images. First of all, the 1921 map on the left serves not just to locate the building, but if you look, you will see the 2 exterior light courts and the 2 interior light courts. We're planning on infilling the interior courts and 1 of the exterior courts. That's another piece of what needs to go to the commission today. But these 2 images, the one in the center and the photograph on the right, in the center is a rendering of the building, probably done before it was actually constructed, and then a photograph from 1913 on the right, probably showing the as-built conditions. And just briefly, as Meenakshi mentioned, particularly with this powerful cornice, the building had very much the reading of a block, a strong sort of palazzo block. That's its primary identity, and frankly, the main part of the identity that has been compromised by the loss of the cornice. Also, in the original condition, you will see that there were 2 entrances with semicircular porticos. Oops, sorry, I skipped forward. 2 entrances with semicircular porticos, and there was an areaway with railing at the base of the building, and then just sort of normal, probably public space windows serving the hotel. That has changed over the years. The view on the left is the tax photo of circa 1940. By that time, the cornice was still in place. However, the base of the building had changed. The south entry and portico are gone. The areaway is gone, and it's working toward along Madison Avenue storefronts. The original entry on the north is still there. So by the time of the 1985 tax photo on the right, the cornice was gone. We have not been able to pinpoint exactly when it went, although our guess is sometime in the 1950s or the late 1940s. The building in its context, on the left is the view from the southwest. In the middle, the view from the northwest looking down Madison Avenue, and then on the right, view from the east on 92nd Street. So just some context. Here are a number of views with 1295 Madison here in the center, showing the fact that it is very common in the Carnegie Hill district and also onto Fifth Avenue to see this basic configuration of a strong reading of the large palazzo main block of the building with visible setback elements above. This has happened from the time of the original construction. A really good example on the lower right here is 1 East 91st Street, the Otto Kahn mansion, where you see that strong palazzo block with the setback habitable addition on the top. So this is a configuration that is quite common in the historic character of the district. And here's just an aerial photo. The 1295 building is located here, and you can see that these kinds of conditions are very common and quite characteristic of this district. So first of all, looking at the view on the left, there are a number of aspects of this project that are being reviewed at staff level because so much of the project meets the staff level rules. Existing 1/1 windows will be replaced with new staff conforming 1/1 windows. There will be cleaning and repair of the masonry as needed, and there will be painting of the ground floor, the base of the building, in order to unify it more successfully with what is above. I just want to mention that there are two kind of neighborhood institutions in the base of the building, Paula's, and Sarah Beth's, and particularly under these difficult circumstances, the plan is to keep them in place and to keep their leases in place. So we are really not planning major changes to the base of the building, other than that sort of basic unifying of the building and some work on the main entry in order to make it barrier-free accessible, all meeting staff level requirements. The center and the right images show a small issue that technically needs commission review. There are two original fire escape balconies on the second and third floors, and they are connected by a stair, and there is a drop-down ladder. And because egress is being taken care of in a code compliant way on the interior, we are proposing to remove the connecting stair and the drop-down ladder, which are non-original in any case. A different configuration shows up in the historic photographs, but we will be maintaining the original balconies, and that shows here on the drawing to the right. There's also one currently door that leads to the fire escape that will change to a staff compliant 1/1 window. So the first issue we'd like to talk about is the cornice. The 1913 view on the left shows what a dominant feature the cornice was, unifying the massing of the building into a single palazzo. And hopefully you'll see from the view on the right how much of the integrity and the fundamental mass reading of the building has really been diminished by the loss of that cornice. I think you can also see that there are these 10th floor habitable spaces that you can see, particularly at the northwest and the southeast corners, where the masonry mass goes all the way out to the main facade plane of the building, really interrupting that unified view, which was the building's original character. We have, as you saw, pretty good documentation of what the original cornice looked like from the photograph and the rendering, but we're particularly fortunate in having another building by the same architect, Louis Korn, surviving. It's also landmarked as a contributing building in the Ladies Mile Historic District. And that has a cornice which is remarkably similar to the cornice that is documented in the photograph. So it gives us particularly good evidence for us to come very close, if not all the way, to the original cornice design for this building. And to explore that in a little more detail, on the left are photographs of the the existing cornice in the Louis Korn building. Excuse me. This pink stuff is kombucha, in case anybody thinks I've entered cocktail hour too early. Excuse me. So you can see on the left, it's a quite well detailed cornice. It's got all of the classical parts. It's got the architrave, it's got the frieze, and then it's got a quite ornamental cornice. We have looked very closely at this and have come as close to duplicating this cornice as we can. A little more detail here. Where we are planning on reinstating all of the parts down to the bead and reel astragal molding, the egg and dart ovalo molding, the water leaf motif on the very top cyma molding. We have got the count and the spacings of the brackets duplicated based on the historic photograph. There are 32 of them along Madison Avenue, and that's what we're putting back. It's also a very substantial cornice. Technically, it's actually an entablature. It goes all the way from the architrave up to the cornice. We are proposing one that is 4 feet 4 inches high, and that projects approximately 3 feet out from the facade plane of the building. So this is a very detailed and a very substantial cornice. We felt that the best thing we could do is to work most closely with the surviving cornice where we have the best documentation. And there is, as you can see here, I guess is the better place to look. There are these two little fascias that are at the very bottom of the cornice that form the architrave, and they come directly onto the keystones of the windows on the top floor, and that is the format that we are proposing to duplicate at 1295. Again, it's what we have the best documentation for and would have the least guesswork in producing. So here is a rendered photograph giving a sense of what the building would look like with the new cornice. And we feel that this is a very strong gesture in bringing back the fundamental reading that the building was always intended to have. So proceeding from the cornice, I'd like to talk about what exists and what we are proposing on the roof. So here's a zoomed in, not a pedestrian level photograph showing again this parapet where the cornice has been removed, and also showing these parts of these occupiable 10th floor spaces at the southwest and the northeast corners. Again, they're quite substantial, quite visible, and come right out to the facade plane. Also, the basic sort of arrangement here is that there is one story of habitable space, a 10th floor level, and then above that there is miscellaneous and quite visible circulation and mechanical installations that are visible above that. What we are proposing to do is to maintain that same arrangement. We are proposing a habitable 10th floor that incorporates the massing of the existing and adds something like 1,520 square feet. This is a modest amount of square footage that we are proposing to add. And then above that will be circulation and mechanical functions, no habitable space. So that kind of basic arrangement that exists is what we are proposing to put back with that modest expansion I described. So here is a bird's eye axonometric and a series of photographs that hopefully will give you the idea of how much is up there now, how miscellaneous it is in its appearance and function and configuration. Here also in plan and in axonometric are those two excuse me, light courts that we plan to infill, and photographs of them on the right. So two 10th floor plans existing on the left, proposed on the right, in that sort of bluish turquoise kind of color. That shows the habitable space, occupiable space, FAR, and then that purple color shows the combination of circulation and mechanical that is above. So I think you can see what we're proposing, a number of things of what we're proposing here. We are proposing to cut back the 10th floor spaces that go all the way out to the main facade plane. Along the west side of the building, we're proposing to cut those back 10 feet. And along the south side of the building facing 92nd Street, we're planning on cutting them back 15 feet. That will give that cornice, when we put it back, a much stronger reading and will allow the building to read strongly as that main block that it was meant to be. This also shows that we're planning on taking the circulation and mechanical space and pushing it as far to the north and the east as possible. Again, to minimize its visibility as much as we can. So this is the proposed main roof plan. It shows that same basic thing. What it also shows here is that we are proposing to concentrate as much of the mechanicals on top of the 10th floor roof as we can. We started out with a number of the mechanical installations on top of the penthouses, but based on discussion and commentary from the community and on what really is architectural good sense, we have now decided to move them down a floor so that they're on the top of the 10th floor, and that substantially reduces the visibility of what we are proposing. And then here is the bulkhead plan. These are the bulkheads that exist on top of that 10th floor. I think one of the more important things, one of the biggest visible elements is the water tank that I'm showing here. And you can see that in its current state, it aligns with that exterior light court on the east side of the building. And I think you can see, comparing this, that we are pushing the highest mass of the building back behind that light court, again, in an effort to reduce visibility as much as we can. So here, comparable west elevations existing on the left and proposed on the right. Just a few quick sort of statistics. The existing 10th floor, the habitable partial 10th floor, is 12 feet 9 inches above the roof line. The proposed habitable 10th floor is 13 feet 3 inches. So it is within 6 inches of the height of the existing is the proposed. Also, the proposed its total height above the roof is 13 feet 3, but with the height of the cornice, you're really only seeing 9 feet of it above the cornice. Also, final statistic, the height of the existing various bulkheads, the height of the bulkhead itself, that is the stair bulkhead, is 15 feet 1 inch, and the height of the water tank maximum is 23 feet 1 inch. So that's what we have existing. Proposing to do the elevator and stair bulkheads at 17 feet 10 inches, so an increase of 2 feet 9 inches. And then the mechanicals will be 20 feet 2 inches. In both cases, they are well below the maximum height established by the existing water tank. So we are coming in, we feel, very much within the volume of what is up there now. So here are sections. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but it probably helps most to look at the ones on the bottom. This section is a blow up of the section here, and it talks about ceiling height. This is the 10th floor. There is a ceiling height of 9 feet here, and then above it is approximately a little over 3 feet of space above the ceiling. That space is occupied entirely by roof structure, by mechanical ducts, by sprinkler pipes, and by drainage from the roof. So we are really trying to minimize this as much as possible. We think a 9-foot ceiling height is very reasonable. That translates at the southern part of the building, where there's the larger living room, that translates to a 10-foot ceiling height. But that's really because we need this extra space. It goes down to 9 feet here because we put so much of the mechanicals directly on top there in order to keep them off the highest part of the building. So here are comparable elevations from looking from the east, existing and proposed. I think the thing you most see here is this 15-foot setback exchanged for the 10th floor that goes all the way up. Here is that one light court that we are proposing to fill in, and it is virtually invisible from the street. This is probably the most telling of the images. So it's a rendered axon, of course, of what we are proposing. So here is the occupiable 10th floor. We were trying to hit a design balance between something that is contemporary and distinguishable, but not a glass palace on top of the building. So what we are proposing here is a combination of brick to closely approximate the color of the brick in the main body of the building. And the trim is all limestone. The windows, while we do obviously want them to have as much light and view as possible, they are fully framed by brick, and there are pretty substantial brick piers between them. So we think that we've come into the spirit of the existing in terms of materials and window configuration, et cetera. So that's the occupiable space. Everything above it is either mechanicals or circulation space. And I want to make this point clearly. This is the main stair and elevator bulkhead. It's required by code to get stair and elevator access up to the roof of the 10th floor. Or excuse me, not up to the roof to the 10th floor. This just provides access up to the 10th floor itself. What's above is required elevator mechanical. So this is a code requirement just to get up to the roof of the what is the roof of the building / the 10th floor. This is a small stair and elevator bulkhead that provides access from the 10th floor only up to this roof terrace. And then of course here we've got the mechanicals that instead of being there are here. So we were careful to minimize this as much as we possibly could. There's no occupiable space there. There is a tiny little toilet up there, but that's it. This is circulation space. And I want to emphasize, we thought about this very carefully. If we were to remove this entirely so that there was no access up to this roof, it would be really unfortunate from a functional point of view because this whole terrace would be gone. But more importantly, from a landmarks point of view, if you took this away, what you would see is this behind it from the street. And this is a simple, straightforward requirement just to provide access up to the 10th floor. So I wanted to describe that as thoroughly as I could. In terms of materials palette, we are proposing again brick to very closely approximate the brick on the formal facades, a brick on the sides to approximate the common brick that is there. Window frames for the building, a darker color, and that's what shows in the black and white historic photos. And the cornice color just slightly darker than the color of the brick, which again is what also shows on the photos. Indiana limestone, this is not stucco. And then there is one little metal divider screen between the terrace area and the mechanicals, and that will be in metal planted so that it turns green. So here's a view, rendered elevations from the side. This is from the east on the top and from the north on the bottom. Again, showing the setbacks and showing that what you've got is habitable space with circulation and mechanicals above. Comparing the two. And again, what I really want to stress is that we're pulling these back. We are not adding any level of habitable space that is not already there. And what we are adding totals 1,520 square feet. So what does all of this look like? We want to start out with, there are two views that you will see that we think are the ones that are most prominent. And we want to start out with what I emphasize. These are zoomed views for convenience. They are not what you see from the a pedestrian view. But we wanted you to see these. On the left is the existing with the mock-up, and on the right is the rendered elevation, rendering of what we are proposing. We thought it would be useful and really make an important point to line in red what is already there and what is already visible. And we feel that the difference is not a considerable one. And we also feel that what you do see or would see under what we are proposing is much more harmonious with this basic historic configuration of a palazzo block capped by a cornice with a setback area of roof construction above. So this is what you see in the zoom. This is that view as you would actually see it on the street from 91st Street looking up Madison Avenue. So there's the existing and there is the proposed. From now on, except for the one other most prominent view, what we are doing is including the pedestrian views as the ones that are most realistic. There is an appendix to this presentation that zooms each one of these views as well if you want to see it. So here is the view existing / mock-up and proposed from Madison, looking up Madison between 91st and 92nd. This is a prominent view of the building and the rooftop conditions, which are very visible currently, are not visible at all above the cornice as we propose it. Here is a view from the corner of 92nd Street in Madison. Again, the same situation. A view looking directly across Madison Avenue. And a view looking up Madison Avenue from 89th Street. It is, I'm having a hard time finding it. It's back there somewhere. So now we're on 92nd Street looking east. We're going toward Fifth Avenue, looking back onto Madison. Here is the existing and there's the proposed. From this particular view, some of the proposed is visible above the cornice, but mainly what you're seeing is this historic block of the building capped by the cornice. Now we get to what we think is the second of the most prominent views. And so that's why we wanted to start with a zoom on that as well. So here's the existing / mock-up, and here is the proposed. You are seeing the 10th floor, the occupiable space, and then everything you're seeing above it is circulation and mechanicals. And again, we think it's important to consider this in the context of what's lined in red of what you're already seeing up there anyway. So to a considerable degree, we've got something of an exchange of existing visibility for something that we think is much more thoughtfully designed and masked to respect the building's character. So this is how that view actually looks from a pedestrian point of view. Certainly what we're proposing is visible, but we think it's visible in a way that compares very positively to what is already visible. Now we're moving back across Fifth Avenue, visible from a distance, visible in a much broader context and with much less focus on it. Now we're switching to views from the east on 92nd Street. So there is the existing seen above the lower building adjacent to the east, and there is the proposed. This is all the way across Park Avenue. There's that's 92nd Street. There's the existing and there's the proposed. On Park between 92nd and 93rd, in the interest of full disclosure, there's a slit between these two buildings. There's what you see of the existing and there of the proposed. On 93rd Street, this is the individual landmark, now the Spence School, formerly Billy Rose House, Walker and Gillette. And there is the mock-up of what we are proposing, and there is the rendering of what we're proposing. To the east of that, going toward Madison Avenue, There is another slit between the two buildings. This is the building that the corner bookstore is in. There is an existing view of the side and of the building, and here is the proposed view. Several views. We'll conclude with several views from the north on Madison Avenue, existing and proposed. Again, I think you'd pretty dramatically see how we're cutting back all of this mass that currently exists. There is a reconfiguration of the windows on this elevation. This reconfiguration and the one that is on the east elevation both meet staff level rules, and so are not before the commission today. Here we are looking down from 93rd Street, and here between 94th and 95th. So that, we think, is about as full a context of the building's visibility as possible. And we just want to conclude with this view. This is not the only view that you see of the building or would see under our proposal, but we think it is the most prominent and the most iconic view of the building. And it is one which we feel presents a much more faithful rendering of what its original character was meant to be. So that is our proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? Please raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Okay, I see Commissioner Devonshire has a question. Please go ahead.
Well, the new cornice looks like cornice light to me compared to the image of the one that existed before. Can you explain why you've cut back so much?
Well, Michael, first of all, you know, our feeling were of the original cornice, and maybe this is not as bold as the original cornice. Quite honestly, I'm
maybe
certain about that.
Definitely not as bold.
But we did everything that we could to get the proportions right, not to skimp on the overhang, not to skimp on the height and prominence of the frieze. We feel what we were shooting for was not cornice light. It was something that, while maybe it doesn't completely replicate the original, maybe it doesn't hit the dimensions. We did not mean this to be a token gesture or something that was pared down, not to have character.
Well,
okay,
it does.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Bland, I see you have your hand up, so please go ahead.
I do. Thank you. Again, on the cornice, I just want to go back to the Department of Buildings rules. Usually it's only 10 inches or something like that that you can go over the property line. So I'm just imagining, and I've forgotten in the beginning of your presentation, are we set way back or somewhat back from the property line? So therefore, this does not require a variance in order to do this?
You know, this may be something that Meenakshi or Julio can answer more effectively than I can. But one of the things that I know we are hoping for is that Landmarks will intercede for us with the building department on the basis of our proposed cornice being something that is desirable from a historic point of view.
I hear you, but just the simple question is the building on the property line?
The building.
Go ahead, Meenakshi.
The building's on the property line, and just to address your question about the building code gives some relaxation to historic buildings. So the projection in a historic district, assuming that Landmarks will support that, the DOB wouldn't have an issue with it.
Yes, okay, that's right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a relatively recent modification at DOB where they will allow the restoration of
I
a missing
remember it
feature.
now. Thank you. A new building, no, but but a preservation of an historic building, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Goldblum.
Hi. Question about your new 9th floor or 10th floor penthouse. You had said that the ceiling height was 9 feet. It goes to 10 feet in the living rooms.
Correct.
Because the air conditioning now, is that not shown in the drawing? Because the drawing shows it straight across. Am I missing something?
No, it is straight across. Maybe I wasn't clear in explaining this. The reason it can go with the same height, the same consistent height, the reason it goes to 10 feet in the living space is that most of the rooftop HVAC is pushed back to the north. And that's the point where you need more ductwork and more piping directly underneath the rooftop HVAC. So there's more room for ceiling, an extra foot of ceiling height.
Right. But do your sections,
excuse me,
your
commissioners,
sections show that?
Hold on, everyone,
Sorry.
the YouTube video has gone down. So we have to take a break for a minute until we get it back up. So I think we just need it's a little unclear. We're looking into the problem, but if everyone could just hold their comments and thoughts for a few minutes while we try to figure out what's wrong. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Mark, should I pause recording?
Yeah. So Lisa?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube. I'm just looking at what I think it actually might have restarted itself. But
Yeah,
yeah, it says live on
restarted it for me
YouTube.
as well.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Well, that our
hold on one
emergency.
sec. Let me just confirm, Mark.
It's a test of our emergency broadcasting system.
Okay. I think things look good, so I think that we could start again. So I'm gonna record again.
Okay, and then put the audio back on. Okay, and okay. So commissioners, I think we're back on. So can we pick up from?
So when I look at your drawing 21 of 66, your proposed sections, they show, it looks to me like a 9-foot ceiling front to back. So is it actually going to 10 foot in the front and it's just not drawn that way?
Yeah, what it is where that section was taken, the living room, the 10-foot ceiling space is toward the south.
So it's just not shown in this. It's just not shown in this section.
Through the north.
Yeah. Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Hello?
Can we see the historic photographs, please?
Yes. There's supposed to be a way to get back without having to flip through all of them. But I haven't quite mastered how to do that. So here we go. Sorry. Okay. Oops. There we go.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there other questions right now? Okay, So without seeing any hands raised at this time, we'll turn to public testimony. So Lisa, will you start the public testimony? And if we can now return the slide with the information on how to enter the meeting, that would be great. And any member of the public who wants to speak and is watching on YouTube and hasn't entered should enter at this time.
Great, thank you. We had 3 people sign up in advance, so I'm going to start with them. And I'm going to start with Seda Harrigan.
Sorry, and Edith and Corey, can we put the first slide back on, or the last slide with the public testimony, Colin? Good, thank you.
Okay, Seda,
Yes.
from Community Board 8, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Could you please state your name for the record, and then you have 3 minutes to testify. Thank you.
Sure. So my name is Saida Harrigan, and I'll be testifying on behalf of Alita Camp, Chair of Community Board 8 Manhattan. Chair Carroll and Commissioners, thank you for hearing this testimony. CB8 vigorously opposes the application to alter the former Hotel Wills at 1295 Madison Avenue and effectively add a 3-level rooftop addition. No CB8 board member voted in support of the application at our February 19, 2020 full board meeting. I would like to amplify the resolution disapproving the application. I recognize and take into account the changes in the plan since the presentation to CB8. 1295 Madison Avenue is a 9-story building with an existing minimally visible penthouse on a block of brownstones between 92nd and 93rd Streets. Its relative height compared to those of the surrounding buildings makes it a focal point, drawing attention to the entire exterior. The significantly lower buildings along Madison highlight the historic facade of 1295 Madison, meaning anything that contrasts with that facade or is inconsistent with the historic character of the district only stands out more. The proposed changes are not in keeping with the character of the Carnegie Hill Historic District or this turn-of-the-century neo-Renaissance building type, which is characterized by symmetry in the absence of any rooftop structures such as recessed floors or penthouses above the cornice line, other than stairway and elevator overrides, which are generally well set back and not visible from the avenue and streets. The applicant proposes effectively 3 stories of structures above the reinstated cornice line. This is excessive height and bulk for a building of this size and this visibility. The applicant asks that the 2nd floor of the addition be the 2nd floor of the duplex penthouse with a large terrace surrounding it. The mechanicals extend above that. The proposed addition extends horizontally as well as vertically and eliminates our beloved water tower, replacing it with mechanicals. Even though the applicant moved the mechanicals to a proposed 11th floor, they would still be too bulky and too visible. Although the applicant talks about restoring the cornice will not be replicated. It is not an adequate restoration and does not compensate for the added bulk of the proposed rooftop addition. Instead, this cornice reintroduction is an attempt to modify the facade to look something like, but not be as dramatic or as striking as the original, in hopes that this will distract from and mask the bulk and inappropriateness of the rooftop addition. We are seeing historic districts eaten away by these kinds of changes. Here, where they are especially visible from along Madison Avenue and on the side streets, this would be an egregious affront to the aesthetics that brings our residents and visitors pleasure and a concrete sense of the history of this stunning neighborhood. Beauty matters, history matters. CB8 urges LPC to preserve our neighborhood's beauty and history and character. We urge you to deny this application. Sincerely, Alita Camp, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and then the next person who also signed up to speak is Laura Sakin, Friends of the Upper East Side. Laura. Laura, can you hear me?
Hello?
Laura. Hi,
Hi.
Laura. Hi. Could you please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to testify.
Yes. Laura Sakin for Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and Honorable Commissioners.
Friends recognizes the vast aesthetic improvement that this alteration will bring to the century-old institution of Carnegie Hill. However, aesthetic improvements aren't always appropriate, which unfortunately is the case of the proposed cornice and rooftop addition at 1295 Madison Avenue. While we appreciate the reintroduction of the cornice, Friends Preservation Committee sees this as a missed opportunity to bring back the unusually large original cornice design with its decorative elements and restoring the building's grandiosity. While similar in style to the original, the proposed cornice is too small in proportion to the formal hotel. It is inadequate and completely out of scale. Finally, Friends commends the applicant for working with the community and listening to the neighbors' concern by lowering the rooftop addition height. Nevertheless, we believe the proposed penthouse and mechanical additions to be too bulky and too visible still. We encourage the applicant to continue working with the community and the commission to come up with a plan that is less obtrusive and more respectful towards the building and the historic neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Okay, next who signed up in advance, Simeon Bankoff, Historic Districts Council. Okay, Simeon, I've just unmuted you. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Hi, just please state your name for the record and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lisa. Simeon Bankoff, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. While the restoration of the historic cornice is a highly laudable decision that does assist in reducing the visibility of the proposed rooftop addition, upon close examination of the historic photographs, it becomes immediately evident that the proposed cornice is much too small a termination on this building. HDC requests that the dimensions of the original cornice be replicated, which will assist in reducing the visibility of the proposed rooftop addition. We additionally request that to set the addition back to even further aid in limiting the visibility. In the same vein, we would suggest that the rooftop water tower be maintained, as it would visually break up the rooftop bulk and in turn make the proposed addition less jarring from the distant vantage points where it is highly visible. Finally, concealing the air conditioning mechanicals at the roof would be a welcome improvement to this proposal.
Okay, thank you, Simeon. Next, I'm going to call in Lo Vandervalk. Lo, can you hear me? Okay, Lo, I'm unmuting you. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Lo Vandervalk?
Yes.
Lo, can you turn off the volume of the YouTube, please? Lo, can
Yes.
you hear
Yeah,
me?
we will.
We're doing it.
Okay, Lo, I'm unmuting you. And can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Lo Vandervalk?
Yes.
Lo, can you turn off the volume of the YouTube, please?
We're trying to.
Lo, can
Yes,
you hear me?
yes, we're doing it. We're getting a delay.
Okay, Lo, I'm unmuting you. And can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me
So
now?
yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Yes, we can hear you. And Lo, if you could just state your name for the record, and then you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Lo Vandervalk. I'm president of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. First, I want to say that this is a very important building, and it's recognized in the historic district designation report on page 33 as a Renaissance revival style apartment hotel, and that type of building did not have rooftop additions other than the bulkheads for stairways and elevators. So this is a troubling aspect. Also, they mentioned in that report, although open to tourists and other short-term visitors, they were widely considered, that is apartment hotels, they were widely considered by the middle class to be a residential option. only one example of this building type is included in the district, the Hotel Chastanyeri, now Hotel Wales. So just want to emphasize the importance of this building. We agree with much of the testimony already given, that the rooftop additions are still very visible. It seems you can do either one of two things. You can set back more, or possibly another option is available. I'll mention that. But I do want to throw in that we object to the glass screen railing. We think that should be a metal railing on the 11th floor. And one option that we think should be considered, which would hide a lot of the rooftop bulk, is the expansion of the 10th floor so that it's a replication of the floors below it. The Landmarks Commission approved of this type of a change for the building across the street, 1290 Madison Avenue, where a 7th floor is going to be added, approved by the Landmarks Commission. And that took away a very ugly penthouse at the roof, or it will take away, because it's not been executed yet. And we think that this can be done according to zoning, and we think it should be looked into, because it will then reduce the bulk above the cornice line, because you would be lifting the cornice line by 1 floor, and it would, and therefore the building would look more like the type of building that it originally was. I do want to commend, obviously, the improvements that have been made. Others have noted them, such as bringing down the installations on top of the elevator bulkhead and the stairwell bulkhead. I want to make a final comment, and that is that viewed from the north, there is a huge imbalance in the bulkheads towards the northeast of the building. And this is very regrettable, and it's viewed from a block that has several important landmarks. So that is another problem, which we think needs to be more addressed. Yeah, it could be shifted, but this needs to be looked into. Thank you. Is that the end of my 3 minutes?
Yes, yes, that is the end. Thank you very much, Lo.
Yeah.
Okay, the next person on the list is Andrew Tannenbaum. Okay, Andrew Tannenbaum, I have unmuted you. Can you hear me? Andrew, can you hear me?
He's still muted.
He's still muted. And you need to allow us to unmute. You have to click unmute.
Okay.
Andrew, you are still muted.
How about that?
Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Okay, Andrew Tannenbaum, can you hear me?
Yes. Can I be heard by you?
Yes, you can. So if you could please state your name for the record, and then you have 3 minutes.
Okay. The name is Andrew. Here we go. Try this. I can hear you, but it seems like I'm not on mute.
Andrew,
no, you're not on mute. We can hear you, and you could go ahead and speak, but if you could speak into your microphone, that would be helpful.
Andrew Tannenbaum.
Okay, yeah, please give your testimony.
I
Andrew,
believe I am.
if your YouTube page is still playing, can you mute it? If you're getting any feedback, that might be complicating what you're hearing.
Okay. My name is Andrew Tannenbaum. I live at 1172 Park Avenue. Okay, I hope I don't lose you guys.
No, you haven't lost us. You can just keep talking.
How about that? It better?
Yes, but could you please just move on with your testimony and your statement?
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. It'll be quite short since I believe everybody has done a very good job presenting the case. I am doing that. From my perspective, the bulking up of the rooftop by housing the building mechanicals at the northeast quadrant of the roof in an effort to modernize, sanitize, and homogenize the look and feel of this rooftop, and to allow for an additional private terrace garden is a very real mistake. I believe that if the terrace garden were taken away, it would help reduce the bulk and size of the building in the northeast quadrant. The water tower and lack of uniformity of New York City rooftops is a quintessential part of the fabric of our collective view of New York City's skyline. And I'll stop here because it's just too hard to go back and forth this way. So that's it for now. I hope some of it came out clearly.
Yes, we could hear you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, and then I see one more person in the waiting room, Timothy Harrison. Okay, Timothy Harrison, can you hear me? Timothy Harrison, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Could you please state your name for the record? And you have 3 minutes for testimony. Thank you.
Oh, cool. I was going to ask a question. Am I not allowed to ask questions?
No, I'm sorry. You can only provide testimony.
Yeah, and if in your testimony you frame a question, that may be able to be responded at the end of all of the testimony, but it won't be answered on the spot.
Fair enough. Well, I think it's great that they're trying to bring the cornice. I work at the restaurant in the building next to them, Island, and I was curious about two things. because a lot of business that goes to the surrounding restaurants on that entire block comes from people who are visiting unwell relatives and staying there because their relatives are bedridden at Mount Sinai. And also that's like the one hotel in the area where that brings in a lot of new people to the restaurant. And I mean, I don't know how or if they've set up anything that would help keep bringing in new people to the neighborhood and keeping that business and economy flourishing. And then the second thing I wanted to kind of know about was the scaffolding and how long that would be up for this kind of a renovation, because as you know, that block and is surrounded by like outdoor restaurants. And when, obviously not during this COVID time, but when things resume, a lot of business will be lost because it will be hard to have sidewalk restaurant, like open sidewalk restaurants. So that was kind of my questions. Those are my questions. I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that is the last person that is in the waiting room.
So Rich, do we have any written testimony that was submitted in addition to the community board resolution?
Yes, we do. And quite a bit of it comes from Carnegie Hill neighbors. They have sent in over 200 petitions in opposition. We also individually have 8 letters in opposition and 1 letter in support.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to now turn back to the applicants to ask them to respond to some of the comments that were made in the testimony. I think that most of the public who spoke had concerns about the restoration of the cornice, not in concept, but in terms of detail and size. And this was raised by Commissioner Devonshire as well. So I think if you could again respond to the comments about the cornice and how it differs from the original in terms of height, depth, projection, or detail, as far as you can tell from the photographs and scaling the photographs. And then, you know, there were also comments about the mechanical equipment and the visibility of the addition. I think, Bill, in the beginning, you also talked about historic precedent at other apartment hotels for rooftop additions, 1-story penthouses. And, you know, I don't know whether you distinguished between apartment houses and apartment hotels. I think that's something that you could speak to. I think there was testimony that apartment hotels never had penthouses, and I'm not sure that's actually correct. I believe that we've seen some apartment hotels that historically had penthouses. So if you can address that, but also at the same time address the relationship of those penthouses that were historically on apartment houses or hotels in terms of their relationship to the main building in terms of material and design. So Bill, would you mind? I know that's a lot there, but if you could take that, that would be great.
I wouldn't mind at all. First for the cornice. This to me, quite honestly, is one of the things that is most interesting about historic preservation for me. It combines community concerns and issues about a sort of quality of life and environment with some things that get really to be a matter of connoisseurship, questions of proportion and which dimensions work with which. I think there's a real discussion, obviously, to be had about this cornice. Exactly what was it originally? Quite honestly, I am not sure. And I don't think the evidence shows it clearly. Obviously, the evidence shows a cornice that is a very prominent feature that really creates a strong boundary point between the main mass of the building and what's above it. I am really not sure whether that 1914 photograph was perspective corrected. Whether there is a reading of that cornice that makes it appear heavier than it actually was. It was clearly a dominant feature. Could it be bigger? I suppose it could be. I'm not sure if that would be the right way to do it. But there's a real discussion to be had with respect to the cornice. We worked very hard on this. We tried not to skimp on this cornice. At the same time, we tried not to make it a cornice that was so high that that it completely dominated the building and dominated the experience of being on the roof. So there was a certain balance that we wanted to achieve there. But we really adjusted the details and the proportions of all the pieces of the cornice in order to make the height of the cornice and the projection balance as well as possible. It was really our best shot at doing something that was as right as we could make it, based on incomplete evidence and based on sort of the real world. So that's all I can really say about the cornice, except, you know, comparing it to the kinds of abstracted cornices that one often sees. This cornice goes much farther than many, I would say most, do, and it's a genuine effort based on a close reading of the evidence. With respect to the issue of Renaissance revival buildings and Renaissance revival hotels never having anything above the cornices, that is simply not the case. The photographs that we showed of the neighborhood did not include other Renaissance revival hotels. But what it did establish is something that you see all the time with Renaissance revival and classically inspired buildings. The cornice creates a very strong demarcation of the main block of the massing of the building. And it happens all the time that there are things happening above that cornice that are subsidiary to it, and that exists sort of within or secondary to its definition of the main block of the building. Those kinds of things are not exclusively circulation and water towers and mechanical. There is very frequently designed habitable space up there. And I would refer people to the third or fourth slide that we showed that shows many examples of that in the city or in the neighborhood. In terms of hotels, it is so common that hotels at the turn of the century made a strong Renaissance statement with a strong cornice, and then above there were all kinds of spaces. You saw this with theaters, you saw it with hotels, you saw it with major apartment buildings. There are so frequently things that are happening that are designed architecture above those cornices. So that simply wasn't true. And then I'll conclude, but there were so many aspects of the testimony that we tried to clear up and anticipate in our own presentation. The idea that this is a 3-story intervention, the idea that that it somehow violates a principle of symmetry. I mean, all you need to do is to look at the slide that's up there now, and look at how asymmetrical the building is in its current reading because of the changes that have happened and the loss of the cornice. So this is, I'm sorry, but I really have to say this. I think that the response to this proposal is out of balance with what the proposal actually is. It's a very serious attempt to put back a major feature whose loss has really damaged this building. And then above that, it is taking an existing 10th floor of habitable space, pulling back the parts of it that are most visible and most disruptive to the original design of the building, and adding 1,500 square feet to it, with circulation above. The commentary almost seems to be about another project other than the one that is actually before you.
Okay,
I don't know if anyone else on the team has anything to say. But.
all right. Is there, Meenakshi, did you want to say anything before we wrap up?
I just want to echo what Bill said. I think the team really did. All right. The team really was incredibly earnest in trying to find a solution here that would work and that would be respectful to the building. And, you know, it's interesting because one of the comments that was made was, well, why don't you extrude the entire 10th floor all the way to the top and relocate the cornice? And yes, that's an approach, but I think we really felt that this was the right way to approach the building, which is to bring back the cornice at the 9th floor, set back where these extrusions have really marred the building. And in some, I think that we've obviously, as a part of the proposal, we've had to upgrade the building. That's a reality. And we are constrained by code issues, but we've really tried to make an effort to accommodate these various things within the building and at the same time really bring back the prominence of the building proportions. So it's true from various vantage points, you may see more of the penthouse, but I think by bringing the cornice back where it was historically really begins to redefine what the original proportions were for the building. So I think just from that perspective, another solution of extruding the 10th floor further, which may give us more floor area, but I think would really change the proportions of the building.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions for the applicant team at this time? Okay, if you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Okay, so, but not seeing any questions, I think that I will move toward closing this hearing. So Commissioner Bland, will you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, will you second that motion?
I second that motion.
Okay. And can we have a vote to close the hearing? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes and the hearing is closed. So this was a very thoughtful presentation and thorough presentation, and we had also very thoughtful comments from the public. So a very good discussion today. I do want to start out by saying that I think that conceptually there's a lot of great work going on here. I think the building has been marred by this existing 10th floor that eliminated the cornice and creates this jagged roof line. And so I think conceptually the idea of restoring portions of the facade, restoring a cornice back to the facade, and albeit I think the proportions are something that we need to discuss, but the idea of putting a cornice back, pulling back the addition so that it's set back to be, I think, from us, the immediately surrounding area makes the building look very much like it did historically and restores the intrusions at the restores and replaces the intrusions at the roof. So I think from the immediately surrounding streets, this is kind of a win-win. I understand that as you move to distances to the south and the west, you do see the penthouse over the front facade. So I think that our conversations will focus a lot on the height and proportions of the cornice, the setback of the addition, the height of the addition. But I do think that the proposal to substitute sort of an unfortunate condition that's there today with something that from the street level will recall the historic appearance, I think is a great one, and I think we should take it seriously. And I also agree that if the 10th floor was extruded up, I really think that those proportions would change. You have a string course and arched openings at the top floor, which sort of become part of the third tier of that palazzo form. So I think adding another floor up there really would change the proportions of the facade. So that's just where I come from, that as on that suggestion. But I think we should go around and have a discussion. And I just want to remind the commissioners that we're talking about the cornice in the penthouse, but there's the mechanical equipment, the glass railings, and then filling in the courtyards and the modifications to the fire escapes, removing the ladders. So I'm going to start going around the table for discussion. So I'm going to start with Commissioner Bland.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to start by saying something about what Bill said at the end, which I thought was a brave statement for him to say. But it resonated with me, and it was already resonating with me that there's so much good that's happening here. I was kind of surprised by although it was mentioned consistently in the testimony by so many people against this, and I couldn't quite understand it, frankly. So I'll just say that, but I will say that there's this preservation in our city, at least, is not so much a science, it's an art, and and often that art involves the community. And our wonderful law that says what's appropriate can change over time. So that means that the community, the citizens have to weigh in. So I listen carefully, and when that's said, and I think that's all part of our law as opposed to other types of laws that exist other places. So, but nonetheless, all that said, I listened carefully, and I was a little surprised by so much negativity on this, what I think is a really wonderful proposal. Can it be tweaked, my term, to make it a little bit better? Yes, I think it should be, and particularly in light of the testimony that we heard. There's no doubt that the cornice is the big deal. There's no doubt that the cornice, as drawn by the architect or his renderer originally, was not built. It might not even been buildable. It's quite a flamboyant cornice. If you look at that drawing again, it was spectacular, but it was not built quite like that. But also what's being proposed is not also what was built. I think that's pretty clear. It's not as big. So I would think that maybe the applicant could do what he said they might be able to do, which is, if it's already X feet out, 3 feet something out over the public sidewalk and needing a DOB approval, maybe it can be slightly more and still get that approval. So I would think that making that a little bit bigger and more robust might be a solution. If I don't have a problem with seeing what you see above that cornice. I thought Bill's description of what a cornice is and what it does do in a building is exactly how I see it. Often, in fact, most of the times you see things above a cornice. So it's not that you see something, it's what you see. And I think what we're seeing now is organized and thoughtful, and in some ways recessive compared to what you see now, which is a jumble of stuff. So that's my opinion. Maybe a little tweaking up there would make it a little bit better, and we should probably see that. Regarding the other so-called minor issues, I would think that the removal of the two elements of the former fire escape are perfectly fine to do. Leaving the two balconies there in place is fine. I'm forgetting now what some of the other issues are, but maybe I've spoken enough and let others continue around the table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jeannie?
So along those lines that Fred just mentioned, and I think, Sarah, from what you've also said, I do think this project goes a long way to restoring the integrity of the architecture of this building and the beauty of this building. And also a missing link within the fabric of the neighborhood. So I definitely think we're on the right track, and we're not that far away. I do believe that the applicant does need to take another look at the mechanicals. Maybe they can move them around and see if they can make them less visible. I'm sure there's a little more room in there. I can't really tell what the impact or the visibility is of the glass railing. It might be recessive enough so that it looks okay, or it might be a better idea to put a metal railing in there. And I also think the fire escape is, the removal of the ladder is fine. And that's it. I think it would be good to, to tweak it a little more. Wait, and I want to go back to the cornice again, just to whatever. I do believe we should, some extra investigation should be taken with the cornice, because clearly the architect had something more grand intended. We don't know what was built. And to the extent that we can further explore it and potentially add to the original plan or what was, it would be great.
Okay, great. All right, Everardo?
Yes, I have 3 issues. I agree with Commissioner Devonshire that the cornice is weak. It should be stronger. And I think they could look at the images and perhaps change the proposal to make it a bit stronger. 2, I think the language of the addition of the penthouse, I mean, it's the glass portion and the railings are kind of weak. And I thought that I don't mind the penthouse, I don't mind the language, but I do think they should have a stronger parapet to hide the mechanical equipment. And in addition, I think the proportion of the solid to void on the penthouse, it had a different proportion than the existing building. So I didn't know why it changed or what's the idea there, but I think the penthouse is fine. I think the fire escape is to remove the ladder and the diagonal stair is a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Let's see. I'm okay with the closing of the courtyards and the fire escapes, and I think I agree with Commissioner Lutfi that in terms of visibility, they need to pay a little bit more attention to the mechanicals. I also agree that there's something about that solid to void ratio on the penthouse that is a little bit concerning. But the biggest thing for me is the cornice. I think we all agree the cornice should dominate. And I think they've got lots of points of reference to determine how big that thing ought to be.
they showed us, I mean, they educated us quite a bit here. They showed us another Lewis Corn building, and that in that building, the cornice is substantially oversized, and that's a building you can actually sort of figure out. People who know math, and I was a philosophy major, so I don't know that stuff, but people who know math can actually use the size of that building to figure out what the proportioning was. And the same is true of the 1913 photograph. I know that we could set aside the drawing of the building that wasn't built, but next to it, we see 1913, which is, and I understand they may have enhanced the photograph, but there are ways for a structural engineer to take a look at that and figure out mathematically how that proportion worked. So I think there's a lot of information out there that can help them to make that more substantial. And I think that once the cornice is more substantial, it's going to have an impact on that visibility issue. Maybe not completely, but it will have a significant impact. So I also do agree that I think that I was quite a little bit surprised at how negative the testimony and submissions were, because I think that once you tweak these things, again to use Fred's word, I think it gets there. So the cornice, that's number one.
Mhm. Okay, great. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
So I also, my first impression was that the cornice was too timid, small, for sure the fillet might need to be deeper, but the modillions, absolutely. But, and it was interesting for me to hear that the idea that there was this balance that the architects were trying to achieve between having what should be a kind of a grand cornice and it potentially obstructing in some way the view from the penthouse. And I just think they should rethink that if that is, and that's programmatic, it's use related, so I'm not really getting into it, but I want to say that might not be the right way to think. If the identity of the building is once again its robust cornice, it would be interesting and worthwhile to understand that, to see that even from the penthouse. I know that's a little twisted, but I think it could be a good thing. I understand, and I think I'm fine with the penthouse, with the mechanicals, and with generally, I mean, anyone who's ridden the elevator in this hotel and tried to get a suitcase in it understands that this hotel is long overdue for some help. But I can also understand that there might be resistance that may contribute to what has been described as a kind of a negative response, in that it's among the few hotels, certainly in this area, that one can kind of afford. And so there's some, I think, probably a little bit of fear about its going to the next level. But it's a good thing that it is. Probably it's a good thing certainly for the building, and so do it all the way.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Halford Smith.
Well, I think a lot has already been said, and much of I agree with. The cornice is the biggest item they need to address. I think it needs to be much taller, much stronger than what they're showing, and I think that will obviously help to reduce the visibility of the penthouse. But I'm okay with the penthouse being visible. What I find objectionable mostly on the roof are all those small mechanical units. And I think if they could do something to push them back or maybe even screen them, I think that really, the rest of the penthouse and the bulkheads are all sort of well designed and very, well.
Okay.
So all these little pieces of equipment is sort of disruptive.
Great. Okay. Commissioner Chapin.
Yes, I agree. I was struck by the fact that I thought it was a very well-designed rooftop addition, and that such an addition can really be totally appropriate. And I think this is that. It is also distinguishable from the original building, but also, I think, completely compatible. It's also better organized and more harmonious than the current rooftop addition. So all of those things are, I think, great points in its favor. I agree with other commissioners that the cornice, they could look at that as one of the things, not only to get a stronger expression of it, a little more closer to the original architect's intent and even the original building of it. I do think that the rooftop elements are overly visible, and that looking at the cornice enlargement could help that. Another thing I think that they might consider, one of the comments was, why do you have to have a rooftop terrace? Rooftop terraces are lovely, but it's true that I believe, as was noted, one of the bulkheads is accessing that. That's what the bulkhead's for. Obviously, the larger bulkhead is the larger and more prominent one, which accesses the 10th floor. But perhaps if they eliminated the rooftop terrace, if they could eliminate the other bulkhead, I don't know if that's possible, that's the way I understood it, then that would give them room for moving some of the mechanicals perhaps, and really making some of these elements that are a little troublesome less visible. So I'm highly in favor of the project in general, and I'd feel very comfortable with it if they could reduce some of the visibility, looking at some of the things that the commissioners have commented on.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. Yeah, I think everyone's kind of saying a lot of very, very good things. I would just let everyone know that the building code, 2014 code 3202.2.1.2, basically leaves it in Landmarks' hands to say how big this cornice can be, how much it can stick into the street. It's really, as long as you can establish that it was as big as it was, they can have it go out as far. There's no limitation. There's no numerical limitation on it. So I think if the applicant works with the staff to determine what the original projection was, and if they can substantiate that in some manner to the DOB, you could, the world's your oyster. I also think that the vertical dimensions are inadequate. I mean, that's just patently obvious. And I think, if the photograph was enhanced or not is really not something that we normally consider. We normally, every application works off of the 1940s tax photo, and no one's ever, questioning the process involved in making that photo, the lenses or whatever. I think you have good evidence here. Use the evidence to make reasonable judgments about the proportions. The 10-inch vertical frieze that is unadorned in the current design clearly had some kind of swags or three-dimensional quality that was quite discernible in the photograph, and was quite tall. It looks like it was about 3 or 4 feet tall. Just comparing it with the upper floor windows. And that's certainly backed up by the other cornice. And similarly, the modillions seem to be a lot more vertical in the photograph. So I think that, and not to, we've had plenty of applications before us where applicants have enhanced cornice or other rooftop elements, either that were drawn and never built, or that were built and maybe were removed. So one could even imagine the applicants saying, we want to add the acroteria back from the rendering of the other design to try to further mask the visibility of the rooftop addition. And I think that would be something that we certainly have considered similar gestures in the past. While I think that the idea of extruding the building to the 10th floor is kind of a non-starter, we do have plenty of examples in New York City of buildings whose top floors have windows through a very tall cornice. And if you imagine that this cornice is maybe 8, 9 feet tall, as shown in the photographs, it could be that it's a full, you could imagine the idea of having the 10th floor sit against it with windows through a developed frieze. And what that would do is it would allow for the mechanicals to come down onto some of the lower roof. It's a bit of an extreme solution, but I think it could work. But I don't think you need to go there. I think that simply by extending the cornice to resemble the original proportions, you can make this rooftop addition, which is already, I think, minimally visible, even more minimally visible and more appropriate.
You're muted.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Could we go back to that image that has the Bromley there? You know, if you look, I'm sorry, we're beating the cornice horse and it's really dead, but I mean, it is, to me, it's the thing about this building that's amazing. And this building had a supreme Panama hat on, and we're putting a little baker's cap back on it. If you look at the rendering in the middle, if you remove the palmette anthemion and then go to the right and look at the 1913 photograph, it actually appears to be larger in the photograph. So what was actually built is larger than the rendering. And it's a simple exercise that any Columbia University student could do to find either the original print, because that photograph was obviously taken with a large format camera with a bellows that was actually able to do perspective control. And so all you have to do is enlarge that image and you'll be able to figure out the proportions of that cornice in a half an hour. And I think that's what needs to happen. And I think, as some of the other commissioners have said, and some of the testimony said, if you enlarge that cornice to what it should be, it will do a great amount toward alleviating what is the issue that people have with the rooftop addition, which in fact I have no problem with in any case. So to me, it all starts with the cornice.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I just, much has been said and I'm in agreement. I just to add on to Commissioner Goldblum's comment, I think there's a proportion and a profile, and there is a strong sense of a shadow as well as the silhouette. And that's a beautiful building. And to be missing the top and to the weak top, I think that's what all the commissioners are addressing. So I hope the applicant can take it to the next step. Also, he can address some of the concerns about railing is appropriate up there. And then I do agree with some of the comments about it to the degree possible to reduce the bulkhead and the mechanical room or as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think that we have a consensus here. I think all commissioners feel that this is very close and going in the right direction. There are a lot of positive things here. I think eliminating, as I said before, the visibility of the 10th floor from the immediately surrounding streets and restoring the historic appearance is a real win for the building, the streetscape, and the historic district. And to deal with those longer views and the integrity of this restoration, I think everybody feels that the cornice really should be restudied in consultation with the staff to identify the correct height and depth and details. And I think beyond that, there have been some comments about reducing mechanicals, but I think if it's all right with commissioners, I think we can suggest reducing or reconfiguring the mechanical equipment and railings, but leaving it to staff to work with the applicant to do that, because once the cornice is changed, I think the staff will then be able to really identify the points where those mechanical installations are still more than acceptably visible. And so I think we can make a finding that they should be reconfigured to minimize their visibility, but working in consultation with the staff once the staff has worked with them on the cornice. So I think I did hear two commissioners talk about the solid to void ratio of the penthouse design, but I think we have enough to vote it as is with the modifications to the cornice and rethinking the mechanical equipment and railings. So Anne, can I ask you to make that motion?
Sure.
Okay.
Scroll to the top here. In the matter of LPC 20-06688, 1295 Madison Avenue, AKA 43 East 92nd Street in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. A neo-Renaissance style hotel building designed by Lewis Korn and built in 1899-1900. Application is to alter facades, fill in light course, construct a rooftop addition. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. I also note that the cornice was removed from the building and the existing visible rooftop additions were constructed prior to the designation of the historic district. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the demolition of existing rooftop additions and accretions, some of which are located at the street wall and are highly visible, will eliminate unsympathetic alterations that detract from the building. That the presence of a visible rooftop addition on top of a corner building will be in keeping with the original and existing rooftop accretions found at other buildings of this type, style, and age. That the rooftop addition will be set back from the west and south facades, helping to restore a sense of the building's original massing when seen from prominent views from public thoroughfares. That the simple design and neutral color palette of the rooftop addition, including a brick and limestone clad penthouse with punched openings, will help the addition to have a discrete secondary presence at the roof. The glass railings will have a non-reflective coating, helping them to receive from view. Metal railings will be simply designed and will be in keeping with typical utilitarian rooftop installations. That the proposed fiberglass cornice with a tan finish will recall certain aspects of the historic cornice and will return a significant architectural feature to the building. That the removal of the ladders at the fire escape at the Madison Avenue facade will maintain the historic decorative metal fire escape baskets, and the new metal work at the baskets will match the historic metal work. And that the two interior light courts and northernmost courtyard at the east rear facade to be filled in are not visible from public thoroughfares and therefore will not change the perceived scale and massing of the building. However, I find that the design of the proposed cornice is missing some original details and does not closely replicate the proportions of the taller historic cornice. That the proposed rooftop addition will be highly visible from a distance along Madison Avenue and East 92nd Street, and that the proposed HVAC units and railings are visible in prominent views closer to the building and create an atypical silhouette. Therefore, I recommend that working in conjunction with the staff, that the applicant work on the cornice for the proportion of the cornice be raised to improve its proportions and to include additional historic details in order to more closely replicate the historic cornice and decrease the visibility of the rooftop addition. And that the rooftop HVAC units and railings be looked at in conjunction with staff to reduce their visibility and simplify the overall appearance of the addition.
Okay, Commissioner Bland, would you make a second that motion?
I'll happily second it.
Thank you. And now I'll turn to Rich to call the vote.
Thank you. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Letby.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Okay, 11 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that is approved with those modifications, and the applicant team should continue to work with the staff. And I think that is the final item for the day. So the hearing is over, and I want to thank the commissioners for your patience today, and I'd like to thank the public for their patience for waiting, and the applicants for doing such thorough presentations in this new format. So I think with a few minor glitches here and there, we had a very successful hearing today. So I'd like to thank everybody for their participation.
Sarah, I just want to also say thank you to the staff,
Yes.
you and all of your extraordinary staff, because it was you who made this work.
Thank you.
We're just along for the ride.
The staff has been incredible putting this together, researching security settings, the best platform. And as you know, we've done some mock hearings to understand how to adapt it to our own processes. And they've done an incredible job. So thank you for acknowledging them.
You have the best staff in the country.
We do. We
all
do.
agree.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sarah.
All right. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye.